West Denver. Sleep deprived.
It is 6 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, Good Friday, April 18th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Congratulations, you're waking up in the greatest country in history. We're kicking it off. We've got a whole lot to talk about today. And, Bill, I've got to confess I made a mistake.
Uh-oh. What was that?
I invited somebody into the studio that is going to be a real problem.
Yes.
Later.
I can see that. Yes.
It's
Yes.
not the pastor.
No,
There's
not
a
at all.
pastor
Not the
coming
pastor.
a little
No,
later.
it's not
We're
the
going to have an
pastor.
Easter
Yes.
conversation, but
Yes, we have overflow audience members today.
Steffan Tubbs is going to be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour.
That is going to be fantastic.
Steffan Tubbs is live in studio, 7 o'clock hour. He returns to 710 KNUS.
Yes, returns to the scene of the crime.
Troublemaker.
Yes. Don't often do that. But yeah, they say that the criminals always return to the scene of the crime eventually. So, yes, that's what's going to happen.
Speaking
I'm
of
excited to see him.
criminals,
Yes.
he's working with the DEA these days.
Yes, he is.
Dude, I've
incredible.
seen this guy with
Yeah.
the DEA. He's big time now.
Yeah. He's gonna come in here in big time. That's what's gonna happen.
And we'll have on the line Tay
Yeah.
Anderson.
Yes, exactly.
Shanae Tay
Yes.
Anderson. We've got a great show today. We are shockingly 30 years from the Oklahoma City bombing.
That's crazy to think of.
30
Yeah.
years. I
That
was
is
13 years
crazy.
old when it took place.
I was older.
Yeah, you were in your 20s, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So, yeah, I remember it probably in a different format than you do. Yeah.
Steffan Tubbs got to Oklahoma City within 6 hours of the bombing.
Yeah, I was at Clear Channel iHeart at the time. During that with Steffan as well. I remember him going and doing the reports and everything else. Yeah.
Have you worked for everybody? Is there a station you haven't worked for yet?
The only group in town I haven't worked for is Bonneville because they're too new. I've worked for everybody else. Yes. But I have worked for stations that Bonneville owns. So, yeah. So, kind of, but not really.
Yeah, you're a journeyman.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to have Steffan live in studio talk about that experience. Lynne Bartels is going to join us. She was working for the Rocky Mountain News and was in the courtroom with Timothy McVeigh throughout the entire trial.
That's
and
amazing.
We talked briefly the other day just about her experience, and it still brings up emotion. She talks
I
about
bet that's hard.
children with a brick lodged in their head.
Jeez. Oh, that's stuff that you just never can forget.
No.
There's no way you can ever forget that. Oh. That's going to be rough. But, yeah, can't believe it's 30 years.
Yeah. And then Colorado's connection to this, because we may have a lot of people that moved here since then.
Yeah.
We hosted the trial.
Yes.
Right in downtown Denver of Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was here. There were all sorts of other things that were involved in it, and it was tough. That was a difficult time because, yeah, he was here. There were things that we talked about that Pete's got some stuff coming up tomorrow on his show from 9 to 1 about people that actually were involved in, like, keeping Timothy McVeigh safe during the trial. Mm-hmm. Some other investigative reporters, Kevin Flynn, doing some stuff. So he's got some other angles as well that we aren't covering today. So between today and tomorrow, you're going to have some incredible coverage of this tragedy that happened 30 years ago.
167 direct deaths, one indirect death as a result of it. Over 600 people injured. It was a terrible day here in American history, and 30 years ago, and then its connection to Waco, all that stuff. So I heard from guys that protected Timothy McVeigh, speaking of that, of what Pete's going to talk about, they never actually moved Timothy McVeigh.
No, yeah, but they pretended.
That was crazy. They pretended to because they were so concerned about white nationalist groups trying to break him out and attacking the motorcade that would have driven him out to the prison in Inglewood, that they actually built a cell at the courthouse and he stayed there, and they just did a fake motorcade every day.
Yeah, fake motorcade to like fool everybody, to let them think that they were taking him, but he just stayed there the entire time. Yeah, which again never told anybody. Yeah,
and were there more people involved than just Timothy McVeigh?
Yeah, there are questions about that.
Yeah,
which is yeah.
One of his attorneys. I watched this in a documentary the other day. One attorney said, "Nope, Tim was the guy. Tim and Terry, those were the guys that did it." Another one said, "I think there's somebody else." So
yeah,
wow.
So what do we don't know? Yeah.
So Steffan Tubbs, 7 o'clock hour. Lynne Bartels, 8 o'clock hour. We're gonna have Jeff Hildebrandt, some cowboy poetry. We got a pastor coming into studio as well. Talk about Easter. Get us all ready for that. And even the director of the documentary Oklahoma City Bombing, One Day in America, on the National Geographic Channel, be joining us here in just about 25 minutes. So a whole lot to cover. I went to the anti-1312 rally yesterday down at the Colorado State Capitol. We'll cover that as well. Talk to a dad who's lost custody of his daughter in part because he refused to buy into the transgender ideology. So wild conversations yesterday, but now it's time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
29 with sleet and snowy conditions in Denver and up and down the Front Range. Expecting a high of 36 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story is sheriff deputy's son is in custody after allegedly shooting and killing 2 people and wounding 5 more at Florida State University. The FSU police chief says that the gunman is a current student at the school. The victims who died were not students. This guy is just simply out of his mind, the gunman, and he'll get what he deserves in Florida. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen actually met with his gangbanger friend in the prison in El Salvador. Great post, Jeff, with his Chiefs hat on and his plaid shirt and jeans. Looks like he's going out to flip burgers in the backyard.
Well, I mean, all the pictures look like they're on quite a nice vacation at the Hilton.
Yeah. Were they drinking margaritas? Is that
somebody alluded to that? I see water and coffee, but it looks like the hotel restaurant at Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, it does. Pretty nice little setup.
This guy, apparently the guy's back from the torture hell of an El Salvadorian prison. He looks fatter than he normally does, and
yeah. And you know what's amazing?
Wearing nice clothes.
You see Van Halen sitting there. I know it's Van Halen, but you know he's got care and love in his eyes and concern for him. Yet this guy could not sit down with the mom whose daughter was raped and murdered, Patty Morin, who was at the White House. I mean Bukele. I don't know if you saw this, Jeff. He posted out that he loves playing chess right after it. So I think he gets it. He's part of this. I mean, snapshots, man. They are so valuable. So here he is. He has sympathy for the terrorist gangbanger, but not the mother of a victim of rape and murder. So very interesting.
That's the dynamic right there. That is it. That is the division, the difference.
I think that's a huge. I mean, Republicans did a great job setting up the left on that one. They really did. Let's hear Tom Homan on with Caitlin Collins.
2 different federal judges said he's an MS-13 member. A police department said he's an MS-13 member. ICE data shows he's an MS-13 member. El Salvador says he's an MS-13 member. As you know, MS-13 has been designated terrorist. The facts of the case have changed since that first decision. So again, I'll leave it up to the DOJ to argue that case in court, but that is where I stand, and that's my belief.
The Supreme Court will hear arguments on birthright citizenship next month. DJT signed an executive order ending automatic birthright citizenship. Ignacio Cruz Mendoza, the truck driver who was sentenced to a year in jail for the deadly crash on US 285, has been deported to Mexico. He was arrested last June after a crash outside Conifer that killed 64-year-old Scott Miller. Reportedly, he had been removed 12 times since 2002. The Trump administration will reportedly start screening the social media accounts of all visa applicants who have traveled to the Gaza Strip. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calls for immigrant and non-immigrant visa applicants who have been in Gaza since 2007 to have their social media vetted. Good idea. 3 Colorado-based international students who've had their visas revoked are suing the Trump administration over the termination of their immigration status. The lawsuits, which were filed this week in U.S. District Court in Denver, alleges that the termination was unlawful and without due process. Each student is from an unspecified Asian country, China. Their identities remain unknown, but the lawsuit says that they attend unidentified colleges in Denver, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Let me see. Okay, that'd be CU Denver, CSU, UCCS, CC, DU, and Metro. All possibilities. Governor Polis vetoed a bill that would have made changes to the Colorado Open Records Act to address the volume of public records requests. Among the changes included giving government entities more time to respond to requests while allowing faster response times for journalists. In Polis's veto statement, he said the bill leaves the custodian with far too much power to define who is and is not a member of the media and what is and isn't news. This is Polis's first veto of the year. President Trump is hinting he may fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
Trump made the comments speaking to reporters in the Oval Office.
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
The statement came after Powell warned Wednesday that tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. Powell is a fellow Republican whose term ends in 2026. He's previously said he would not step down if Trump asked him to, and that it's not permitted under the law for a president to fire or demote him. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Thank you, Tammy. News brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything. Fireplace, patio, and grills. Locally owned and operated since 1954. Online at lairfireplacepatio.com. The Rockies back at home against the Nationals tonight. The Avs and Nuggets open up their playoff rounds tomorrow. 28 in Brighton, 27 in Parker, 29 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Good Friday. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The spring weather we've been enjoying is going to come to a crashing end with a strong cold front. Temperatures today will reach the upper 60s and lower 70s, but it will get a lot colder by late this afternoon and evening. And later today, there will be scattered rain showers and thunderstorms developing. Rain and snow turning to wet snow tonight. Could see an inch or two on the grassy areas by morning. Lows upper 20s. Much colder Friday. Highs only 30s. Lingering snow Friday night. Lows 20s. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Bill met a lot of folks that love and appreciate the show yesterday. Went down to the Colorado State Capitol for a little rally against House Bill 251312. Saw some of our friends down there. William Wolf, you and him have had conversation about Mary and surrogacy.
Yep.
He was there.
Oh, good.
The pastor who you had the clownfish conversation with the other day,
Oh,
he
nice.
was there.
Good.
And you're always the center of the conversations when I go to these
apologize.
places. Scott Bottoms and Scott Bottoms' wife was there. And
Oh, nice.
Scott's wife was talking about the time she's never seen him more worked up.
I know. That was why the last time he was on, I'm like, I'm not going to fight with him. Because she said she'd never seen him more worked up. I'm like, I felt bad. I feel
But
bad.
Scott's saying he loves it.
Yeah, we'll go
He
again next
enjoys
time.
it. There's many things that men enjoy that their wives kind of
like,
go,
why are they doing this?
Hold on a second.
Like the
maybe.
Three Stooges. Women don't get the Three Stooges. And to guys, totally makes sense. Everything about the Three Stooges is like, but of course, yes.
Speaking of the Three Stooges, that's what we've named the three Antifa guys that show up all the
that's
time,
nice.
but they wear their masks and they never talk to or never reveal who they really are. And we asked their
That's
name. I go,
boring.
my name's Jeff. I'm with 710 KNUS. Would love to talk to you. They never reveal their name, so we now call them Larry
Mo and Curly.
Mo and Curly.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
good.
But no counter protests yesterday.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
And this is the bill that we've been talking a lot about that would allow transition and dead naming and misgendering to come into legal custody battle issues. It determines what schools can do as far as dress code, and then you can be brought before the Colorado Civil Rights Commission as a business if you dead name or misgender somebody.
Yeah.
This is
I
the
love
bill
that dress code part. Just
that
a
is
personal thing.
gone
You know
all
that.
the way up. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a personal thing. The girls got to wear shorts under their skirts when I was going to school with the dress code. We had to wear pants. So, yes, if I had to wear a skirt to wear shorts, I would have been in a skirt. I got no problem with
But
that
Bill,
one,
I've
so.
worked for you for about a year and a half now. I've never seen you wear shorts. Now you have the freedom,
Yeah.
and I don't think.
Oh,
I've
I will
ever
over
seen
the
you
summer.
wear
But the
shorts.
other part is it's freaking cold in the studio. It's really cold.
We're not quite David Letterman cold.
I know, not that cold, but it is. It is always, the thing is the HVAC system for the two studios where we sit is different than the rest of the entire office system. And so it is about 10 degrees colder where we are than everywhere else. It's like you walk out of the studio and it's like, oh, this is balmy and nice. You walk in here, it's like, are we hanging meat? Yes. And Pete normally drops it into the 60s, low 60s. Yeah. So he tries to get as cold as possible
That's
in
why
here.
he's been able to stick around so
Yeah,
long.
exactly. So it's always colder in the studio, so that's why. But yeah, I'll probably break out the shorts a bit over the course of summer. The problem is you get the old man legs. That's not necessarily for Sharon. However, I did go rocking. My youngest daughter went to the store. I'm just going to take this in a different direction for a second. With my daughter, I went to the grocery store. Had to run and get doing errands with her yesterday. And we go to get out of the car, and I just realized. I said, I am wearing the ultimate dad uniform. I said, you realize you're walking to the store with me, and I've got on dark socks, shorts that are kind of basketball shorts, and a T-shirt that has paint stains on it. I'm like, I am wearing the ultimate dad uniform. And I go, I'm sorry to embarrass you.
Birkenstocks to go. Would
I know,
be
that's the only thing is that are
topped
Crocs.
it off.
Yeah, I needed Crocs. Yeah, but I had actual shoes on. I said, I am just doing the whole dad thing to you right now. I go, I'm sorry for embarrassing you. She goes, no, it's cool. I understand you're a dork. I'm like, thank you so much. So, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. So continue about the Three Stooges down there.
So great time down at the state capitol. A lot of pastors out. Brave. Man, I got to talk with Jeff Schwarzentraub. He's the lead pastor of Brave, and he's on our sister station. And in fact, he's now taking his show national.
Nice.
He's like the next Charlie Kirk, man. He is he's crushing it over there. And Brave was at the March for Life, set up a table, great presence.
Yeah, they're solid church.
And then yesterday, two pastors, a good portion of the crowd was from their congregation. And you just don't see that among evangelicals. Nice. Now you go to the March for Life, and it's a lot of Catholics.
Yeah.
They show up in droves, Catholic high schools. But evangelicals, they're just not really, which has always been a little strange to me because at one point, Colorado, particularly Colorado Springs, was the center of the evangelical universe.
Oh, yeah. At one point it was. But yeah, with the Catholics, they're kind of like, if the church says, here, you got to show up here, but I don't want to go. You have to show up here and do this. But I don't want to. We need you to go. Fine, I'll be there. That's basically it. Yes, that's the Catholic
We'll
conversation.
talk about indulgences
Yes,
for your
exactly.
family members, too.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly
Really?
it.
You want your aunt, your long-lost
Yes.
aunt,
You don't want them to
enter
go to hell.
purgatory?
Yes. You don't want that, do you? Yeah, exactly. So, yes, the guilt goes far.
Great turnout, probably about 500 people or so in opposition to this bill. Now, what's interesting, and I even talked to some progressives that were there. Heidi Beadle was there from Colorado Times Recorder,
wow.
who is transgender, right? And
That's interesting.
that's a whole separate conversation. But I'm always nice to Heidi, and Heidi's always nice to me, even though we're totally different political spectrums.
Exactly. That's the thing is, even though she's on the other side, Heidi can be a professional and always conducts herself as such. So
So I was talking with Heidi about this. I said, this thing seems to have stalled out. This has gotten so much national attention. In fact, international attention, that the Senate hasn't even put it on its calendar yet. Talked to Scott Bottoms about this. Jarvis.
That's a good insight, yeah.
Brandy Bradley was there. Stephanie Luck. Lots of great folks. And they all kind of said the same thing, is that the amount of attention and the amount of pressure has really stalled this thing out. And there's questions that are coming around civil rights law with this particular bill. And so it's gotten a lot more complicated, a lot of attention. And lawmakers seem to, at this point, be going, maybe we'll give it till the next session.
Yeah.
Right?
Give it some space and we'll try to figure this one out. Yeah. How to PR it around it.
Yeah. Right. So, it seems to have stalled out. But,
good.
but a good conversation, very bold leadership coming from these pastors, which you don't see all too often here in Colorado anymore, especially from these big churches. Pastors, politics, that's a dirty place. We don't go there. We want everybody to like us. And it was nice and refreshing to see some pastors take a stand, speak boldly, speak truth into the culture, and to help lead their congregations. Because if you're just a run-of-the-mill evangelical in the state of Colorado, you're probably going to work. You got all these demands on you. You don't have time to read these bills, to think about them theologically. Having a pastoral perspective on this is really helpful. So kudos. Well done to the pastors that showed up yesterday. It was a good turnout. So one of the videos I'm going to put up is a heartbreaking video of a dad who has not spoken to his 14-year-old daughter in 2 years, in part because of how embedded this worldview on transgenderism is into the entire custody situation, the whole system of counselors and judges and those court-appointed like attorneys and welfare people and all that stuff. And if you're a father that's not willing to embrace the transgender ideology, how it turns against you. And he hasn't even been able to talk to his daughter in 2 years as a result of it. So powerful conversation that'll be coming up on X later today at x.com/Jeff Hunt. So thank you to everybody that turned out. Thank you again to the pastors leading on this. And the attention from all of you has stalled this bill out and likely, maybe, has at least put it on pause, possibly to the next legislative session. So well done, everybody. All right, look, reliability isn't optional when business security is on the line. It's essential. Businesses trust alarm detection systems for the highest level of service and expertise. Think about the time you could be saving using one source for cameras, key card access, fire, and intrusion systems. ADS offers expert alarm installation and testing by highly trained technicians, 24/7 professional monitoring, same-day or next-day service upon request because downtime isn't an option. Dedicated teams for cameras, access control, and fire alarms. Over 300 security professionals working for you. Choosing ADS means your businesses stay protected and will be ready to open tomorrow. They combine human monitoring with the latest AI camera technology to prevent crime in real time. Trusted by small and large businesses, including many Colorado schools, their security experts will review your system for free. Go to adsalarm.com and schedule today. That's adsalarm.com. Alarm detection systems, the first choice of Front Range and Colorado businesses. adsalarm.com. All right, coming up next, we've got the director of a new documentary on National Geographic, Oklahoma City bombing. One Day in America. Watched it. It's a 3-part series. Carrie Isfryn is the director of this. She's going to be joining the Jeff and Bill show, so you're not going to want to miss this conversation. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. 30 years ago tomorrow, 167 people lost their lives, eventually 168, in the Oklahoma City bombing that took place. And Bill, because I'm a Hulu subscriber, I was just watching documentaries. I just happened to watch Oklahoma City bombing One Day in America. And then lo and behold, our friends over at NBC sent us an email. Hey, you want to talk to the director of this documentary? I was like, well, I'd love to. And so joining us on the Jeff and Bill Show is Carrie Isfryn. She's the director of Oklahoma City bombing One Day in America. Carrie, good morning. Thanks for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yes, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
So talk to us. It's a 3-part series. You did a fantastic job, by the way, but give us your inspiration. Why did you decide to pick up this issue and want to make a documentary about it?
Yeah, it's obviously been 30 years for the 30th anniversary tomorrow, and it just felt really like there's a generation or 2 generations who may not have been alive or may not know what happened that day. And it just felt to us like it was so important that people do know what happened that day. To this day, it's still the largest domestic terror attack in the U.S., and so it felt like a good opportunity to tell people what happened that day and do so through the voices and perspectives of the people who lived through it that day. You know, the survivors, the first responders, and the families of those lost. So I wanted to do something which I guess served as a historical record but reminded people that history is a lived experience.
That's exactly right. You do a great job interviewing everybody involved with it, from the woman that worked in the credit union that spent 6 or 8 hours upside down in a chair in rubble, to a mom who lost 2 boys, to the attorneys that even defended Timothy McVeigh. One of the most powerful interviews from my perspective was the mom of the 2 boys. She became a figure, a face of the impact of that bombing on families that had nothing to do with the debate between the FBI and Waco and everything that was taking place, just a totally innocent victim. And she lost 2 sons in that explosion. And you do a great job showcasing her. Talk about her experience in your interviews of her.
Yeah, it is a remarkable woman who, as you say, just went through something unimaginable. And, you know, she spoke with such grace about her boys, and I think it was important for me to show just her love for them, as well as obviously documenting what happened. I think I wanted to make sure that people got a glimpse into who Chase and Colton were, rather than just, I guess, being, a statistic of somebody who died in the bombing. So it was important that we showed a bit of who they were and, their relationship with their mother. And in the 3rd episode, Edie talks about going to the memorial service a couple of days later, and just how much strength that gave her when she saw how many people from not just Oklahoma City, but all over the state, from all over the country, came out and supported her. And she's a remarkable woman. She went on to have 2 more children who are now adults themselves. So it was a real honor to sit with her for a couple of hours and hear her story.
And in your documentary, you spend some considerable time on that daycare that took place. How many kids' lives were lost in that daycare again?
19 children were killed, not just in the daycare. There was also a young girl who was, just at the credit union with her grandparents. So 19 children total were lost that day. And I think that's really important to remember as well, which is that, this is a federal building. But I think what people maybe don't necessarily realize is that actually, there was a whole cross-section of America in that building that day. It wasn't just, people going to work for the government. There was a credit union. There was a daycare. So I think it's really important that people know that, this could have happened anywhere, and it did happen there in Oklahoma City.
We're talking with Carrie Isfryn. She's the director of the new documentary, Oklahoma City Bombing, One Day in America, produced with National Geographic, available on Hulu. I've watched. It's a 3-part segment, very fascinating and worth your time. I want to ask you about your time with President Bill Clinton. You got a chance to sit down and talk with him and get his experience reflecting back on the speech he gave, the day he was, in the moment he was informed about the bombing. talk to us a little bit about your time with the former president.
Yeah, I think one of the things when we first asked President Clinton to take part in this series, we explained, I guess, that this is really about the people of Oklahoma, and he was very receptive to that. And I think one of the things I found interesting about him was that, he knew somebody personally who was killed that day. His former Secret Service agent or somebody that was in his detail was killed. So for him, this was also personal, I guess. And I think you could really tell that in talking to him, just how much he felt for the people of Oklahoma City, and of course then coming to Oklahoma City and wanting to say something to the people who'd lost loved ones, and he talks quite openly about that, I guess, the struggle to find the right words when you're faced with something as unimaginable as this.
You're exactly right. It's an insight into the presidency that regardless of whether or not you liked him or didn't, he was put into a position of trying to console a nation at that moment, and how he responded was incredibly powerful. Well, Carrie Isfryn, director of the film Oklahoma City Bombing, it's a documentary, 3-part series, Oklahoma City Bombing, One Day in America, available on Hulu in partnership with National Geographic. Thank you for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill show this morning.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations to your Liverpool Mighty Reds. You deserve it. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Bill and I, typically when we have a guest that comes from NBC, those are big guests, and they we'll get the amount of time that we have available with them and name pronunciation and all that. And so I go to Bill. Hey, Bill, how much time do I have with her? And he's like, no. We were talking soccer.
No, we were talking. Yeah, we talked soccer. the entire time off the air. I mean, literally, I had to. The music was ending, and you were talking, and I'm still like, I got to put you on the air. We were talking because her team is going to win the Premier League, and we were just nerding out about soccer.
Yeah, British accent. And Bill goes, football.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's me. It's like a shiny object.
Like,
squirrel.
Talk about.
Yeah. Yes.
So I wish we had some more time with her. She had to run. It is important insight. So I was 13 years old when this happened. This was you're just kind of coming into the world and trying to figure out what happened, and its connection with Waco. Timothy McVeigh felt like he had to set things right after what happened to the Branch Davidians with Waco. He would park his car, hand out flyers. That was the motivation for the attack in Oklahoma City. But what I appreciate about the documentary is that it gets into how many lives were impacted that had no part of those battles.
Yeah, not at all. It's the people that were impacted and lost children and family members, husbands, wives, had no connection at all to Waco as far as what had happened. So it was to exact revenge. It was a very odd way because the people involved weren't anywhere near or had any decision-making, possibility to be connected to Waco. And the other one I remember, because again, I'm in my 20s at the time, and starting out in radio, it's the idea of the homegrown terrorist. We really hadn't had something at that level for, at least in my lifetime, pretty much ever. And that was the issue, is it was always external threats, because I came of age during the 70s and 80s, so it was about the Cold War. It was always about the external threats that were going to be facing Americans, and this was, in my lifetime, the first time that there was a really serious domestic threat. We had things like serial murders and stuff like that before, and you had, there was, I was familiar at least with what happened with Kent State and the protests over Vietnam.
Yeah, but this Ruby Ridge, that was kind of a one-off.
That was, and the Waco thing, and I remember the Branch Davidians, and I remember watching that, but this seemed like the first time in which it was an organized response that was directly trying to attack the government, or at least, just the representation of such, and, we've seen some of it. Keep going from there. But this is the one time in which it's like, and Ruby Ridge again clashes with the government over an area, etc. Not the same where it's an action that is being taken per se, like this. And that's the part that was so devastating, was the idea that this was someone that you're walking around with, standing next to in the aisle at possibly, the feed store per se, or the grocery store, at the gas station. And that's someone who may look and have an American flag on their shirt just like you, but their intentions could be completely and totally different than how you're trying to live your life. And that idea that everyone around you could be, this type of an actor that was scary. That was scary.
I think she paints too broad a brush in her documentary with regards to the natural suspicion conservatives have towards government. And I wish we just didn't have the time. And so I'm wrestling with whether or not to even bring this up, because I think she should be able to respond to it. But I want to be honest with, there's one part of the documentary that didn't sit right with me.
Oh, yeah, what?
And it's when they bring in and try to connect Timothy McVeigh with Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's very brief.
Yeah.
But it's a speech of Rush going, we need to hold our government accountable. We need to fight back. We need to push back, all that stuff. And to me, it smacks of somebody that obviously she's not American.
Yeah.
Or maybe she is now, but she's
British.
British.
No, she's not.
Right? So looking at America broadly and painting a general, like the foundation of our country could be deemed a insurrection, right, or a terrorist pushback against the British. So the natural disposition that Americans have, and especially conservative Americans have, towards overreaching government, right? No taxation without representation, the Tea Party, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then she looks at it and goes, well, they're all lumped together. I think she paints too broad a brush there.
I think that's fair, and I think that's a fair critique, and I think that, and I appreciate your perspective, and I think where you hit the nail on the head, at least, it's not necessarily an indictment of her and the work, but the perception from her being outside. And again, we're gonna close the circle here and talk about soccer, and the idea being that there are videos that you will see, and you'll have some coming into the Champions League, the big tournament that's going to be wrapping up here in a few weeks, where as the other team, the opponent's bus, is making its way to the stadium, the fans will line the street and have flares and smoke bombs and be screaming and yelling at the bus. And the crowd gets closer and closer and closer to the motorway and the bus, the closer they get to the stadium, to where they are pounding on the bus as you are the last block or so getting in there. And those are the fans of the soccer team you're playing against. And for U.S. football fans, we would go, my God, that's crazy. We would never see that during the playoffs or a Super Bowl to have fans of the Broncos, the Cowboys, okay, maybe the Raiders, but nobody else. Love you, Gabe. That's for you. Maybe the Raiders. We'd have them, lining the streets, yelling and screaming at the bus of the opponents and using road flares and trying to intimidate them that way on their path to the stadium. We would look at that and go, those soccer fans are crazy, not understanding, one, the culture, but two, that is a small fraction of the people that will actually be inside the stadium. So I think that that's a fair critique, that she took a fraction of people and tried to expand that into a larger realm that is not necessarily the correct, filter or lens. But that's because of her perspective.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. Look, it's worth watching. It's definitely with regards to the family, to President Clinton's perspective, to folks that worked in a credit union. This one lady hung upside down for 8 hours, and they were just about to rescue her.
Yeah.
When they thought there was a second device in there. You remember it was it was a training missile that they used for display purposes in one of the federal offices.
They're like, but maybe,
And so they had to leave her, and she's just like, "Am I going to die now? Like, you were so close to get." It's so powerful to just hear from the people involved.
And
so
that's
it's worth
going to be
watching.
tough, because you get to that point in those situations where, is death the better choice at this point? And psychologically, you've got to start thinking that. And that's where she is, because she has just been left there. She was so close to being rescued and then being left. The idea then you have to deal with psychologically is, well, is death then the better choice? Is that where I'm headed? That's got to be hard.
And she was one of the few to just make it out. So it is absolutely worth watching on Hulu. National Geographic's Oklahoma City bombing, one day in America. Let me tell you about another great opportunity for you this weekend. It's the Easter celebration at the Black Eyed Pea of Colorado. Locally owned and operated by Steve and Michelle. I love this restaurant. I love the people that own it and the people that work there. It's absolutely fantastic. In fact, my parents took my kids yesterday to the Black Eyed Pea of Inglewood, where everybody enjoyed good food, especially my daughter. She loves this restaurant. 8 locations. There's sure to be one near you. When's the last time you took the family to eat at the Black Eyed Pea. This Sunday is Easter. What are your plans? Make sure it includes the Easter celebration at the Black Eyed Pea. They'll be serving the glazed ham dinner. Brown sugar glazed ham served with 2 sides, or maybe you'd like the roasted turkey dinner, hand carved turkey served with stuffing and turkey gravy. It comes with 2 sides as well. Maybe you'd like both, roasted turkey and glazed ham. That's an option too. Or there's the hand carved prime rib, 12 ounces of slow cooked prime rib with 2 sides. Be sure to save room for their fresh baked cobbler served with ice cream. It's the Easter celebration on April 20th at the Black Eyed Pea. I love everything about this restaurant. I know you will as well. Let them do the cooking for you. Keep it in Colorado. Visit the Black Eyed Pea near you. All right, coming up, we got the special loser edition of You Choose the News. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. It's that time of the morning where we got to give the people what they really want. The You Choose the News Loser Edition.
Yes, it is Friday, and that means it's time for the losers. Those stories that Jeff and Blake felt weren't worthy of our attention on You Choose the News.
Man, you are one pathetic loser.
Loser!
Let's go. Loser! You're a loser!
The Losers Club.
Bunch of losers.
You're such a loser. You made me feel like a loser!
She's a loser. You are such a loser. Loser.
Yes, and since Jeff and Blake made such poor choices earlier this week, we are adding a third special celebrity guest to make the choice for the third story this morning. Yes, it is a tiny hunt. Young Stephen is in the studio and will choose our third story. So remember, if you choose a bad one, it's both your dad and Blake's fault. I'm just letting you know. You know how this works. It's America's favorite fake radio news game show, silly stories, really silly headlines, and nobody's paying attention, so shh, it's a secret. Alrighty, Blake Olson in the news department and the two hunts in the studio. Gentlemen, here are your stories, sirs. Headline number 1. Ding dong, the bells are gonna chime. Pull up the stopper. We're gonna have a whopper. Headline number 2, so much at stake. Headline number 3, locally sourced menu. And headline number 4, hey, I know him. Mr. Hunt, your choice, sir.
I know him.
Hey, I know him. This comes to us from Palo Alto, California. Earlier this week, crosswalk buttons along Mid-Peninsula were hacked. This happened in Redwood City, Menlo Park, and Palo Alto. They were hacked where the usual voice that would tell you to be careful crossing the road was changed with voices that sounded like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Yes, in one recording, the video says, I would like to personally welcome you to Palo Alto. You know, people keep saying cancer is bad, but have you tried being a cancer? It's freaking awesome. Yes. They don't know who was responsible or whatever, but it was a little bit of frivolity earlier in the week, which...
Well done.
I know. That was kind of fun.
Way to hack the system,
exactly.
you little hackers.
Isn't that kind of cool? Alrighty. Nice. Blake Olson, your choice, sir. Ding dong, the bells are going to chime. Pull out the stopper. We'll have a whopper. Or so much at stake. Or locally sourced menu.
We'll have a whopper. Steven, you look great, man.
Yes, we will have a whopper. Some of those may remember, you music fans, ding dong, the bells are going to chime, pull out the stopper, we'll have a whopper, but get me to the church on time. Unfortunately, a young bride in Port St. Lucie, Florida was unfamiliar with that song. Recently, she was pulled over. Her and her passengers were going well over the speed limit. How much over? Well, it was a 45-mile-per-hour zone. They were doing a mere 105 in the zone.
Hey, she was probably 105. Right?
Well, actually, the thing is she was a wee bit late to the ceremony. When the officer pulled her over, they said, well, what are you doing? What's going on? She goes, it's my wedding. Whose wedding is it? Asked the officer. It's mine, said the bride. Well, what time's the wedding? She says, it's 2:30. And he goes, you're already late. Yes, when they were pulled over, she was already late for her own wedding.
She like getting ready, and that's why, or
I have no
drunk,
idea. That doesn't. I have no clue. I'm not sure. Maybe unsure of the bride or the husband. I don't know. I'm not sure.
There's
what it was.
so many seniors there, man. It's gotta be. It's gotta be someone who's been married like 7 times.
The thing is, she was late for her own wedding, so the officer gave them a warning and let them go to celebrate the special day. Yes. So yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. So I like the idea. Wait, you're late to the wedding already? Yeah. Poor planning. Okay.
I love it.
Here we go. Now, young Stephen, sir, they have left you with 2 choices. Those are so much at stake or locally sourced menu. Your choice.
So much at stake.
Oh, so much at stake. Recently, while speaking at ASU GSV's summit, Linda McMahon, head of the Department of Education, said children are delicious. Well, maybe not exactly. She was talking about the fact that children should be able to use A1 in learning and how A1 is going to help them teach. She really meant artificial intelligence, but she was referring to the steak sauce. Over and over and over, she made a reference to the steak sauce. Yes. Yeah. And in the final, we'll add a bonus story. Locally sourced menu. A Chinese restaurant in Madrid, Spain, has been closed down because their roast duck wasn't roast duck at all. Recently, authorities were investigating some complaints about the place, and they found a secret room. When they opened it up, they found bags of meat of unknown origin and 2 plucked pigeons. They did some testing on the meat, and yes, the meat in the bag is pigeon. They're serving pigeon as roast duck. However, it's not illegal to raise and roast pigeons in Spain, but you got to have a license. The restaurant didn't have a license. They were catching street pigeon and feeding it to the customers.
I saw that.
Yummy street pigeon.
Yeah.
Yes. Alrighty. I was going to say something inappropriate there, but young Steve's in the studio, so I can't do that. All right, back to you,
thanks,
sir.
Steve, say you're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is KNUS. He rocks.
It is 7 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, Good Friday, April 18th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. Scratch that. Jeff, Bill, and Steffan Tubbs video. The dude is in studio here with us.
Am I supposed to not say anything right now?
Right, you can. Yeah.
You're not part of the co-host.
I thought it was Blake's time.
Yeah, we're going to get to Blake. I'm just so excited to have you here,
it's
man.
so great to be back here to the old homestead. I love what you've done with the place. 48 cameras, 28 new monitors. Crowley's got master control across the hall.
That's exactly right.
You see the edit setup that Adam's working off of? Dude, that's
Adam,
nuts.
my former producer.
Yeah. That is nuts, the video setup they've got us hooked up with.
Let's just make the announcement on this Good Friday.
Yeah.
I'm coming back.
Yes.
The resurrection of Steffan Tubbs.
He's rested. He's ready.
Very timely, Jeff. Very timely. No, that is not true, but it's actually, it sucks to be here today with you guys because of why what we're going to talk about. But it is always great to see you both. And Crowley and hear Blake.
Text messages are already coming in about how much they miss you. So you got a good fan base that's excited to hear. Yeah, right.
Mom?
I remember when you brought her in here on your final show.
Yeah.
You brought the kids in too.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to get to Steffan Tubbs as we talk about the 30th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. Steffan was there within 6 hours of the bombing and covered it from beginning to end and all he experienced. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. This is a real gift to all of us to be able to talk to Steffan Tubbs. But now it's time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Friday. Good morning. 29 with snowy conditions in Denver. Be like Steffan and get to work safely. Be careful. Expecting a high of 35 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, Florida State University students holding a memorial for 2 people who were killed in the campus shooting on Thursday. 6 others, including the suspect, were injured. It happened during lunchtime on the crowded Tallahassee campus. Students gathered near the scene of the shooting last night to lay flowers and light candles. The shooter is the son of a sheriff's deputy. And I did hear the mainstream media this morning trying to push hard that he's a white supremacist. I mean, he could be a racist. That's very well possible. Who knows? But he obviously has a mental problems. He's mentally deranged, a nut job. But you know what? If he really wanted to show his white supremacy, he could have gone across the street to FAMU, which is Florida A&M, one of the biggest historically black universities in the country. But he was at FSU. But the mainstream media, man, they went all out trying to push that narrative. So just a horrible story in Tallahassee. Ceri Isfryn, who made a documentary about the OKC bombing, joined the fellas last hour. The 30th anniversary is tomorrow. She did a nice job telling the stories of people like one mother who lost 2 sons in the bombing.
Yeah, it is a remarkable woman who, as you say, just went through something unimaginable. And, you know, she spoke with such grace about her boys, and I think it was important for her to show just her love for them, as well as obviously documenting what happened. I think I wanted to make sure that people got a glimpse into who Chase and Colton were.
And in your documentary, you spend some considerable time on that daycare that took place. How many kids' lives were lost?
And you could see that and more, and also the great Steffan Tubbs, of course, is coming up. And Pete has a huge show tomorrow morning on the Oklahoma City bombing. Big Tish, Letitia James, New York AG, facing fraud charges after fraudulently trying to ruin DJT.
Thank you for having me, Errol.
Absolutely. What is going on here? Did anybody contact you before this letter went out accusing you of this, that, and the other and making a criminal referral about real estate transactions?
No, not at all. And let me just say to all New Yorkers and to all Americans, the allegations are baseless. The allegations are nothing more than a revenge tour And as you mentioned, my office was successful in securing a $454 million judgment against Donald Trump and others for exaggerating the value of his assets. He engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud. And the interest is accruing each and every day while the case is on appeal.
Head hate on me. Can't stop DJ T, and I ain't going nowhere, so you can get to know me.
Oh, yeah, what comes around goes around, Big Tish.
I love that the left right now is put into the position of either having to admit that the Department of Justice can be weaponized against its political opponents, because that was the whole thing, right? Like, oh, if you didn't do anything wrong, what do you have to worry about? Or that they're just as guilty of the same stuff they raked Donald Trump over the coal for, and enjoy your time in prison, I guess.
What a clown show. Watch it. I mean, it just gets better and better, and I'll have more sound from her coming up next hour. You're right, though. I agree with you. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen met with his gangbanger in the prison in El Salvador. Leftist media says he was wrongly deported from Maryland last month, even though he was illegal, had a long rap sheet, and was trafficking illegals. Tom Homan with Caitlin Collins.
2 different federal judges said he's an MS-13 member. A police department said he's an MS-13 member. ICE data shows he's an MS-13 member. El Salvador says he's an MS-13 member. As you know, MS-13 has been designated terrorist. The facts of the case have changed since that first decision. So again, I'll leave it up to the DOJ to argue that case in court, but that is where I stand, and that's my belief.
Eddie Van Hollen said he was initially turned away, but then he was allowed to visit Kilmore Garcia, who was wearing a Kansas City Chiefs hat and a nice little plaid shirt, collared shirt with buttons down. They sat down and had a beautiful, nice little coffee and water, I think. President Bukele posted last night that he loves playing chess. The photos show Van Halen, listening with care and concern in his eyes, even though he was not able to do that with Patty Morin, the Maryland mother whose daughter was raped and murdered by an MS-13 gangbanger from El Salvador here illegally. He didn't even call her. Picture tells 1,000 words. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on birthright citizenship next month. DJT signed an executive order ending automatic birthright citizenship. Ignacio Cruz Mendoza, the truck driver who was sentenced to a year in jail for the deadly crash on US 285. He's been deported to Mexico. He was arrested last June after a crash outside Conifer that killed 64-year-old Scott Miller. Reportedly, he'd been removed 12 times since 2002. 27 in North Glen, 28 in Centennial, 29 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue, and I just realized Stephen and Steffan in the studio right now.
Hold on, I'm rearranging my bucket of cervezas.
Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The spring weather we've been enjoying is going to come to a crashing end with a strong cold front. Temperatures today will reach the upper 60s and lower 70s, but it will get a lot colder by late this afternoon and evening. And later today, there will be scattered rain showers and thunderstorms developing. Rain and snow turning to wet snow tonight. Could see an inch or two on the grassy areas by morning. Lows upper 20s. Much colder Friday. Highs only 30s. Lingering snow Friday night. Lows 20s. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
It's a real honor to have him back in the studio live with us. Steffan Tubbs, he's now moved on from 710 KNUS. He's the public information officer for the DEA, the Rocky Mountain Division. Here, I still get to see him regularly, which is a real blessing. But
Because of that parole situation.
Yeah,
and stuff.
right.
That's the problem.
Comes to check in.
Listen, it's because of your criminal background, Billy, that you're not over there with us every Tuesday.
I know, that's the issue. I'm not allowed yet. I can't do that.
Someday.
I'm getting a chance to go through a Citizens Academy, learn all about how the DEA operates and the great, most importantly, the important work that they do in this community to keep people safe, our community safe, and protect lives.
Yeah.
So
it's good.
And you're working with great people, man.
I love them. Good morning. If anybody from the DEA is listening, they're wondering if I'm going to screw up. I'm not talking about any ongoing operations, past operations. Just to jump right into it, to me, Jeff and Bill, it is really hard to believe that it's 30 years tomorrow
30 years.
Since the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah. Wow. I was 13 years old. Let's start with... Well, I guess I want to rewind here. The reason I brought you on is because when you work in media, you get a front row seat to these types of things. And so you can either talk to people that were victims, right, and walk through what happened that day to them directly, and you can talk to the media that witnessed all of it, and you had a front row seat, and I can't believe you were there within 6 hours.
Yeah.
And working for KOA at the time, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through the day. Because this happened at about, 9 o'clock in the morning?
9:02 a.m. Central Time, 8:02 a.m. Mountain Time.
Yep.
And I literally remember like it was just a few weeks ago. I was the morning editor, so my glamorous shift at KOA began at about 12:30 a.m., got in, and then our show ran until 9. And so I was the morning editor, putting together the newscast, coming on a couple of times an hour to do news headlines, top stories, here's what's coming up. And my writer, to my right, between us, was an old AP, Associated Press printer that would, bzz, bzz, on the dot matrix printer, would spit out bulletins and advisories, etc. My old writer... in the newsroom, Tyler Lopez, who went on to have a great television career at Channel 7 here locally, and then out of state, I believe, in the Midwest. So I remember that morning, just a typical morning. I'm probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, Mountain Time, pretty tired. And all of a sudden, it was either a ding and the zip zip, or it was just the zip zip. But I remember every time the printer would go, it was loud enough you could hear it through your headset, and it was zzz, 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 and you could tell it kept going. Multiple bulletins, and I reached over, kind of tore the paper off, read it. It said Oklahoma City bombing at the courthouse, and that would eventually be proven wrong. It was the federal building. So I looked at Tyler, and I said, "This could be big." This is before even anything the Today Show pops in, breaking news, or any of that. The other thing we got to remember, it was 1995. You don't have cell phones and cameras and all of that. So as that morning progressed, cutting to the chase, it gets worse and worse and worse, and we can't believe it, and we're doing updates, and then I don't know if we took network coverage or not. And then my hero, my mentor of the newsroom over there at KOA, the since retired Jerry Bell, I remember telling him about 9 o'clock Mountain Time, so about an hour after, I said, I'll go. It's not that far away. Do we drive? Do we fly? And I had nothing. I had no overnight bag. I didn't have I don't even think I took a backpack to work at that point in my career. He said, "Let's go." So I think I was on maybe a 1 o'clock flight, and progressively getting worse. Were there hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at work already? What was the death toll going to be?
Well, they initially thought it was a gas explosion. I watched some of the media in Oklahoma City. They thought maybe a gas line explosion.
And I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Nobody could fathom. Granted, we had in 1993 the first World Trade Center bombing, but nobody could fathom.
Yeah, Oklahoma City,
heartland, what have you. So I remember I ended up getting to the brand new Denver International Airport, flying out. And Jeff, before we came in to Will Rogers Airport, hand to God, this is the truth. I have no reason to embellish. The comm came on the airplane, and it was a very somber flight. Everybody knew where they were going into, and everybody knew what had happened. We just didn't know the death toll. And they said, are there any, ding, if there are any doctors or nurses on board, please ring your call button. And I mean, my hair stood on end, and I'm like, I'm going into hell.
Yeah. Wow. And with the idea being, we want to get them off the plane right away.
We need them
over. Yeah.
It was overwhelming. You mentioned, it is Oklahoma City. I mean, Oklahoma will always be a part of me.
Yeah.
Because I know it's so... I don't think I've cried about this in 30 years, man. I apologize. The kids, those people that just went to work. I went through a lot of therapy after this. I was 25, 26, and none of us had ever seen anything like that. The building, when I got to the airport, I got a rental car, and driving from the airport blocks and blocks away, there's just busted glass everywhere. Just driving this rental car through, and every window was blown out. And I came around a corner, and you see this smoldering remains of a building. There are people that are maybe alive in there that are not going to make it through the rest of the day. They're not going to be rescued. And it's just like this gigantic monster took this bite out of the front of this building. And it's still chaotic. People aren't running around anymore. People are very determined, going from point A to point B, trying to find loved ones or first responders, trying to save lives. And it was unlike anything I think most reporters there, most members of the media, most first responders, you'd never seen anything like that, especially as it starts to trickle in to your point a few moments ago. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate, and I still think, but for the grace of God, this case would have eventually been solved, but not in the incredible speed in which, McVeigh is driving the getaway car just north of Oklahoma City. He gets pulled over because he doesn't have a license plate, and he has a weapon. They were almost, then fast forward that later that day, they were almost ready to release him. But I guess those are just my initial, I caught myself off guard. I did not think that, the emotion's there, right? I think about this day always, every day for the last 30 years. But to actually be with my friends here and to talk about it, and then sadly for the next, day upon day after day after day, hoping beyond hope that they would pull survivors out.
That voice you hear is Steffan Tubbs. Steffan's joining us on the upcoming anniversary tomorrow, 30-year anniversary tomorrow of Oklahoma City bombing. He was with KOA at the time, was on scene within 6 hours of the blast. And Steffan, I want to ask you what you did then. So you kick into media mode.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tell a story to everybody, the entire nation's eyes are on what just happened in Oklahoma City. And I imagine at a certain point, you're watching all the devastation, you're trying to take it in, but then there's a switch that flips and you're like, I've got to start
you can't,
covering this,
correct.
right?
No, it's exactly right. I can't go down there and just start crying in front of the building. Yeah. Because what's the point? Right. Trust me, there have now been decades to cry and be sad about it. But I went down with literally a small suitcase that was the mobile phone. This thing was probably a briefcase size, a little bigger than a normal briefcase, and it had a big brick battery. And quickly I found out that this newfangled technology, the cell phones and all of that, nothing would work. And I felt like, I'm sitting on this story and I'm interviewing people and I've got sound to play back to the station. And, by the first few hours, you knew it was big going in, but then seeing it for yourself and seeing that building and hearing about the people that again, this was a rescue operation for the first 48, 72 hours. Most of us would talk with the first responders off the record, and they're like, there's nobody. If we pull one person out, we're going to be lucky. But I ended up making friends with business owners about 2 blocks away. They had, I believe it was a paper and copy machine company, and I just said, I need a landline. Is there any way? I'm from Denver. I need a landline. I'm a reporter. I wanted to talk about this. They were outside of that blast zone. So they had maybe a little bit of structural damage, but they still had everything intact. They had power, they had water, they had phone service. And lo and behold, the good Lord took care of me that day, because then for the next 5 or 6 days, they actually gave me a little place, a little desk with a phone in that business, and that's where I could broadcast from. And fast forward like a year later, maybe a little less, we KOA being the Rockies station, when the Rockies were actually good, we brought that family of from the copy machine place back. We hosted them in a suite at Coors Field just as a thank you, because had it not been for them, I don't know what I would have done.
That's Steffan Tubbs. He's now with the DEA, former host here at 710 KNUS, and we're reminiscing, reflecting on the Oklahoma City bombing 30 years ago tomorrow. Now, you get on the ground, you start talking to whom? You mentioned first responders.
Mm-hmm. I always try to go and talk to first, if I can. Yeah. I act like I'm still doing this, but when I was in the media, I always tried to talk with like non-officials. Yeah. I want to go talk with the business guy. So, and I should mention, because you've mentioned where I work, and I'm so appreciative of being able to come back and talk about the Drug Enforcement Administration, and other venues. But DEA lost 5 employees that day, and obviously Timothy McVeigh targeted this federal building because he wanted to kill as many government workers as possible. But when I got kind of backtracking, when I get there, and I told you about all of the broken glass everywhere, I'm in the rental car, and I pulled around maybe a block or two away. I want to say it was maybe the northeast kind of portion of where the Murrah building sat. And there was an auto body shop, and this had plate windows which were no longer there. And I remember there was a guy sweeping with a push broom, and he was the first guy I interviewed. I went in and identified myself, and he was, not overly friendly. I mean, he's probably pissed off that he's got thousands of dollars worth of damage. At that point, nobody knows the death toll. We know it's really, really bad. And I just remember not only this gentleman, but dozens of others that I would interview over the course of the coming week. They all just talked about this deafening blast, just how loud, people's eardrums were obviously blown away and blown out, and the damage. But then there was the injuries and the death. I mean, 800 or so injured, people from flying glass to, just any injury that you can imagine. And it kept coming back, I know, as the first day and the second day kind of progressed. The adult deaths were horrible. Those innocents that went to work just to go to work. Come on. But it was the kids. And then that would transpire 2 years later when every day, I know you mentioned my great friend Lynne Bartels, who was with the Rocky Mountain News. I mean, we sat next to each other for every single moment of both trials, gavel to gavel. And then I know you got to take a break, but what would have never happened again in my media career is I got there about 6 hours after the bombing, see that, feel the emotion, try to put that aside because I am not the story. It's these people and what they're going through. Fast forward to 2001, right before September 11th. It was June of 2001. I didn't witness, but I was in Terre Haute, Indiana at the federal prison where McVeigh gets the death penalty and is killed. So you talk about bookends. You know, that never happened. In 34 years of news, that was the one where I was like, I was there for the start and the ultimate finish. And when we come back, because I know how radio works, I want to tease for you what happened in a Denver courtroom when one of the McVeigh attorneys came up to me. Unbeknownst to me, he even knew who I was and the message that he wanted to pass along.
Because there was a message passed along from his client. Interesting. All right, you're listening to Steffan Tubbs. He joins the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff, Bill, and Steffan Show. Steffan Tubbs live in studio. You know the name, you know the voice.
I hope it hasn't.
They all love
someday Jeff, we're going to forget us all.
It is, I mean, we're getting text messages. God bless you, Steffan. You look great, man.
And Brian from Arvada called in and said hello. You recognize him as Brian COVID during the COVID years.
I remember Brian. Hello,
yeah.
Brian. Good morning. Good morning to everybody. How nice.
Yeah. He wanted to say hi.
Seems like it was just yesterday. I was sitting in your chair, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yep, and you still have the PTSD.
We were going to bring
not just from that. Clearly, if you were listening a few moments ago.
Yes.
Bringing Tay Anderson in, but couldn't get.
Oh, bring it on. That'd be fun. I still would. I was going to say someday I'd love to debate that guy. Actually, no.
Aurora City Council people. So, Steffan and I are reflecting on Oklahoma City 30 years later, the bombing, terrible loss of innocent life that took place there. Why it happened. Lynne Bartels is going to be here, and we'll talk the trial, all that stuff. But you get an interesting message from Timothy McVeigh's attorneys at one point.
Yeah, can I go back just to when I leave?
Yeah.
The last couple of days. So I did the week of coverage, and just being down there and getting within probably half a block by the end, when the perimeter had been kind of relaxed, just seeing this devastation, realizing there's no one else alive. And so went to, at the fairgrounds, there was, I think, a National Day of Prayer that was declared, but Billy Graham was there, and President Clinton, and the governor, Frank Keating. And so I was there for that, and we brought back on KOA, took the network coverage for it. Then I think it was the following Monday that it was either Monday or Tuesday that it was time to leave. That my Jerry Bell at KOA and the wonderful general manager Lee Larson, they were like, "You've done enough, kid." And I remember I had the rental car, and I parked, I don't know, a few blocks away, kind of near the business that had helped us out so much in letting us use the telephone and the desk space. And it was unseasonably warm. It was maybe midday. I had a flight. I knew I was leaving for the final time. Would I go back to Oklahoma City at some point for an anniversary or whatever? I really wasn't thinking that, but I wanted to leave or get to the airport. So I remember walking up to the door of the rental car, and there was this kind of warmish springtime breeze. And I said, must be some feedlots close. Grabbed the door handle and stopped, because it was the smell of death. It's not feedlots or cattle. And that's how I left Oklahoma City, onto the airport. And again, I'm not trying to, my story is, and my experience means nothing. But you did ask me to come and share it, because I do feel like
it's a front row seat, man.
How can he bitch and complain? You've got 168 people that are dead and 19 children. But in not thinking about this for a long, long time, Jeff, it's right there. So fast forward, we knew that the big next steps, where the hell are they going? They've got Nichols, they've got McVeigh. Where's the trial going to be? So, over the course of I then became the Oklahoma City bombing guy. So to say that this changed my life professionally, 100%. I ended up, after the trials, getting a job offer with ABC. And again, it's like, this tragedy changed the course of my life, where my children were born, what kind of paycheck I got, leading me to KNUS, leading me to the DEA. I mean, it's because of Oklahoma City. So when the trials moved here, I was there, and God, again, thank Jerry Bell at KOA for realizing the enormity of this and saying, you will have a seat in the court. You'll do this gavel to gavel until these trials are over. And I mean, to commit me to do that, it did get me, if I can make light a little bit, it got me off of the 12:30 a.m. shift. So during about the midway through the trial of McVeigh, one of the attorneys in a break leaves the court well and walks like 3 rows back, and he looks at me and he says, "Are you Steffan Tubbs?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm Randall Coyne with McVeigh's defense team." And obviously I knew who he was because he was right there sitting next to his client. And he said, "Tim wanted me to find you." And I'm like, okay. And he said, "Tim wanted me to let you know that he appreciates your fair reporting." And 30 years, a little less than 30 years later, I still don't know how to take that. Yeah. Wow. The biggest mass murderer to that point, at least in the country's history. This is, again, pre-9/11. That's one thing I want to end with, is that people forget about Oklahoma City because of 9/11, and they're both horrific, and we shouldn't forget either. But for an attorney to come in and, "Yeah, Tim just wanted me to tell you that he appreciates your fair reporting." And then I'm like, well, I said, okay. And I then...
How does he know?
Here's how... this is what I deduced and would later find out to be true. In his cell, no television, but he had a radio. But I don't really wear that with a lot of pride, you know. Hey, Jeff and Bill, you know, your number one listener was Ted Bundy, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
And then to be inside that courtroom every day, guys, and make eye contact with McVeigh.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this. So I'm 13 years old watching this. One of the things that I've always found so kind of interesting was how fast it seemed he went through the trial to execution.
Like I mean, personally, I think it should always be like that, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, and even if it's not to the point of a death penalty, let's forget dragging these things out and dragging the families and the victims and all. I mean,
but did he? And I've watched these documentaries, and again, I'm coming to this late. Like, I remember it as a kid. I'm, what, 7th grade?
Yeah.
Okay. But so I'm coming to it late. He seemed almost like a soldier that felt like what he did was part of some mission he was
100%. It was Waco, Ruby Ridge.
Yeah, and he's just
revenge.
like, well, this is just what I do.
Yeah. And you know what? Though I got the compliment from him via his attorney, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about why. I've watched the documentaries, and I did all of the research, 3 decades ago, but he's dead. He deserves to be dead. Terry Nichols, in my opinion, should be dead and not sucking off the government teat at Supermax for the rest of his life.
Did Terry Nichols build it with Timothy McVeigh?
He was a co-conspirator, and he had had every, make no mistake, McVeigh was the mastermind, but Terry Nichols was there every step of the way. And if you don't think that Terry Nichols, you think he was just maybe encompassed by all of this hatred or whatever, Terry Nichols, if he had stopped and said one thing to authorities in a certain amount of time before April 19th, 1995, none of this happens. To me, that shows you had a little bit to do with it. And the same with the 40ers in Arizona, Michael and Lori, who were part of the planning and all of that. I know Pete probably will talk about that a little bit more tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there were people along the way that knew something was going to happen somewhere.
Wow.
And they didn't.
Did Timothy McVeigh ever express any remorse?
Not that I'm aware of. He did, he did say in I guess portions of either interviews or his authorized, what he said, he authorized an autobiography or biography, I should say. he didn't want to kill non-government employees. So they picked out one place, for example, and the blast radius, if this thing works, this ammonium nitrate fertilizer bomb, if it works, it'll kill people across the street. They don't have anything to do with the government. And let's move to another location. And that's one of the reasons why it was the Murrah building.
We're talking with Steffan Tubbs. He's live in studio reflecting on the 30th anniversary tomorrow of the Oklahoma City bombing. 168 lives ultimately lost as a result of that. I'll ask him as we close here after this break, as he reflects on where we are as a country now after seeing all that, his thoughts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Live in studio with us is Steffan Tubbs. You remember the name and voice from 710 KNUS. He was afternoon drive time for many years. He was with KOA moments after the bombing at Oklahoma City took place, was on an airplane, flying down there within 6 hours, stayed for over a week covering the loss of innocent life that took place, the response of law enforcement and rescuers. He was there when the president spoke. And we're just reflecting on this because tomorrow's the 30th anniversary. 30 years. I was only 13 when this happened. So I'm learning from those that had a front row seat to such a terrible tragedy. Steffan, you're now 30 years removed from those days. As you reflect back on it, you and I were talking about the importance of keeping this memory alive.
Yeah, I think the tragedies of 9/11 clearly, I mean, they're horrible incidents, but one had more impact. One was, but not to someone who lost a loved one in Oklahoma City. I just think that you know, I want to remember Pearl Harbor, right? I do. My family does. Remember Pearl Harbor. But don't forget about Oklahoma City, how big a deal that was and how shocking that was pre-9/11. That was in the heartland, obviously, at a federal building that, you know, post-Oklahoma City, post-April 19th, 1995, you know, there were laws passed and physical changes. If you weren't alive in 1995, you look and see how the structures are in many ways hardened now, federal facilities. That was all a result of Oklahoma City. There are people, you know, that have moved on. I'm just not one of those. I think about it every day? Absolutely not. But in having the opportunity, and I appreciate you and Bill and KNUS for talking about this. I know Pete will tomorrow as well. It's, again, there's this relationship between Oklahoma City, this connection between Colorado and Oklahoma, and specifically Oklahoma City and Denver. And I know that somebody most certainly will be having a lot of trouble and hard times emotionally, even like as we speak, because tomorrow is the anniversary. And
well, you know, I want to ask you this question.
Blessings to them.
You're now in a unique position where you work for the government. A lot of people that lost their lives were just going to work for the government. There's conspiracy theories out there. I'm not going to get into this.
Right.
As you've got to know the good men and women who serve this country, who show up every day to try to do something better, and you reflect on what happened in Oklahoma City, what's the perspective we should have towards the men and women who serve our government?
I would say my perception of where I work is it's not every government worker that I've come across in the last year and a half or so. You don't look at them and go, all right, he or she, they're either for this administration or they're against this administration, right? No, it's not like that. These are men and women who are going to do their jobs, and especially with DEA and law enforcement, we're going after the bad guys. We're going after the bad dudes and dudettes that are killing our kids, that are poisoning our streets, tracing them back to the Mexican cartels. There's not a lot of politics. And that's, so to your point, going back 30 years, yeah, I'm sure there were people in that Murrah Federal building that had opinions on Waco and Ruby Ridge. But guess what? They also were worried about what they were going to have for dinner that night, getting the kids to soccer practice, picking up the infant from the child daycare center. They were the innocents. And McVeigh took that from them along with his co-conspirators.
They sure didn't deserve the death penalty. I mean, and that's what it was.
Yeah. But look.
I'm not talking about McVeigh. I'm talking about the innocent people.
No, they
that
did not.
died.
They did not. They did not deserve to pay the price. Whatever.
Right.
And McVeigh was not the judge,
jury, and executioner.
Exactly.
He deserved the death penalty, 100%.
And he, if he's not in hell, I don't know who is.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for
Yeah,
going down and remember Oklahoma City today or tomorrow. Just think about it, because especially you were young.
Yeah.
Bill and I were not. We weren't that old, but it's important to remember, and I know I certainly will, and hopefully more people around Colorado will as well. Yeah. And the country.
19 kids lost their lives, and I will never forget that picture of the firefighter carrying the.
Yeah, we had
baby.
a chance to interview him.
Did you?
Yeah, and that was an incredibly emotional interview. It was not just me one-on-one, but this firefighter and the other public information officers down there were just amazing as well. And what's strange is that I don't think I have one picture from Oklahoma. No cell phones. I didn't have a camera.
Right. You did all of your reporting,
but it's all in my mind.
Hey, brother, thank you for taking time to join us. I know you're very busy saving lives and protecting Colorado.
I'm just talking about the people that are saving lives and kicking ass.
And I've got a chance to meet them. Yeah. They're some of the best people out there.
Yeah. Give my best to Blake as well.
And I think for you to take time to come here and share your experience with a guy like me that was only 13 years old. My son is in the room. He's only 11 right now. So we watch this as a moment of history. And I know you like to interview vets and ask their stories. You got to be that for me today. So thank you, brother. Appreciate that.
God bless.
We'll continue. Lynne Bartels is going to join us next. She was through the trial with Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, and she's going to update us, so you're not going to want to miss this conversation. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710. This is KNUS.
It's 8 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, April 18th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show. Very emotional, Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah.
Woo, boy.
That was a tough one.
Powerful. Lots of emotions, lots of thoughts running through my head. We are 30 years from the Oklahoma City bombing, and the reason we're covering it today is because it was, at the time, the worst terrorist attack that had ever taken place in American history.
Yeah.
I was 13 years old, and Oklahoma City is close.
Oh, yeah.
It's the heartland of America. It's probably, an hour flight?
Yeah.
Maybe? Hour flight away?
Yeah.
And we have friends that were involved with it. I was 13, and then you had the trial take place here in Denver. So wall to wall. Denver Post, Rocky Mountain News, all the television stations covering this for whatever the duration of the trial was. But
yeah, it was a daily story, if not at times hourly.
Yeah,
where they'd have
exactly.
updates throughout the day.
And we've got friends in the media that had a front row seat to all that. And you just heard from Steffan Tubbs. Lynne Bartels is going to join us next. She was Rocky Mountain News, sat through that trial day after day after day, and we're going to get a chance to hear from her. This is just a very special moment.
Yeah.
To be able to hear from those that had such a close perspective.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, the worst terrorist attack. And then the fact that it was a domestic terrorist attack makes it.
That was the shocking thing. It kind of pulled everything back. People were like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we had been focused so much on external threats that all of a sudden now this was a more immediate internal threat for different reasons. Of course, you outlined Ruby Ridge and Waco beforehand, and Waco is the impetus for Timothy McVeigh taking these actions. But what David Koresh and the Branch Davidians were doing is completely different than showing up at a federal building and blowing it up. Yeah, that's completely different than what. It's it's a difficult.
And then
thing.
how this spins into, threats today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is fascinating, and we're getting a lot of text messages on that because I've talked to a lot of people that that have called for the assassination, and we had 2 assassination attempts against the president this last cycle, and then I go down and talk to these people at protests that are calling for violence, openly calling for violence.
Yeah, and you look at and you talk about what happened while during the various Trump trials, what the judges in those cases dealt with. I mean, just litany of death threats over and over and over, threatening them and their families.
The CEO of United Healthcare.
Yep, exactly.
Assassinated in broad daylight.
That now we're looking at our freedom of speech is now freedom for violence sometimes, and that's a problem.
Yeah. So lots of emotions. You're welcome to join the conversation. 303-696-1971 or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line 720-819-5115. And I want to take a moment to clarify something I said during that last segment. I want to make it very crystal clear that when I was talking about people that didn't deserve the death penalty, I was referring to whatever you felt about Waco, Ruby Ridge, all that stuff. The people that worked in the government at that point, DEA, Secret Service, ATF, FBI, they don't deserve the death penalty.
No.
Timothy McVeigh deserved the death penalty in this case.
Yeah,
so if there was crossover in that, please, I want to make sure crystal clear on that
clarify
one.
that. That's good.
So, because I think you can legitimately critique your government. That is a constitutional right you have.
Kind of half the show here.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You have the right to critique. You can feel very frustrated with what happened at Waco and the way the ATF treated the Branch Davidians, all that stuff. You don't have a right to pack a truck with explosives and drive it to a building and blow it up and kill 19 innocent children.
Yeah, and we can all critique.
And a whole bunch of other people.
All critique how Waco was handled. And there absolutely are mistakes there. But those mistakes don't necessarily mean the people at that office building that day deserve to die because of the mistakes that no one in that building had any real impact on or ability to change or execution of. And so that's the part is it's like someone coming by and stealing your lunch money and you punch the kid behind you in line. You're like, dude didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the amount of death that took place, 168 lives. Terrible. All right, let's get to news with Blake Olson, and then we got Lynne Bartels coming up.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
.29 with spring snow outside in Denver. Expecting a high of 35 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will abandon Ukraine if no progress is made in the peace talks with Russia. Rubio made the comment in Paris today after a meeting with Ukrainian and European leaders. Rubio said there are a lot of other really important things going on that deserve more attention. Florida State University students holding a memorial for 2 people who were killed in a campus shooting. 6 others, including the suspect, were injured in Thursday's shooting, which happened during lunchtime on the crowded Tallahassee campus. Students gathered near the scene of the shooting last night to honor the victims. The shooter was a sheriff deputy's son. He'll get what he deserves in Florida. 30 years ago tomorrow, the great Steffan Tubbs jetted to Oklahoma City to cover the OKC bombing. He was working as a young reporter at KOA and will never forget that day.
I mean, Oklahoma will always be a part of me.
Yeah.
Because I know it's so... I don't think I've cried about this in 30 years, man. I apologize. You know, the kids, those people that just went to work. I went through a lot of therapy after this. You know, I was 25, 26, and none of us had ever seen anything like that.
Steph was in studio with Jeff and Billy last hour. Great to have you back this morning, brother Steph, and he is now with the DEA. And also tomorrow, a huge show. Peter will discuss and talk about the Oklahoma City bombing 30 years ago tomorrow. Big Tish, Letitia James, the communist attorney general from New York, facing fraud charges after leading the way to unjustly trying to ruin 47 last summer. Remember that and all the garbage she said? Now, this is what a real crook sounds like.
I will not be silenced. I will not be bullied. I will not bend. I will not break. And I will not bow to anyone. No one is above the law, including the President of these United States.
Okay. Well,
the Office of the Attorney General will continue to stand up.
They're saying that your house in Brooklyn is a legal 5-family and the mortgage on it is for a 4-family house. Is that true?
So let me just say that, Errol, you know, as any good attorney, I will not litigate this case in a camera. It's important that we will respond to these allegations at the appropriate time and in an appropriate way. But I will not go back and forth with respect to these baseless allegations. I am more focused again on standing up for the freedoms, the liberties, and for the rule of law in the state of New York.
Head hate on me. Can't stop DJ T, and I ain't going nowhere, so you can get to know me.
You're not fooling anybody, Tish. Big Tish. Gonna be fun to watch her. Vice President J.D. Vance is in Italy for a meeting with the Prime Minister, who was just in the States, and with Vatican officials. Vance is scheduled to visit with Prime Minister Meloni in Rome this morning, and will also meet with the Vatican Secretary of State. Maryland Senator Van Hollen finally got to see his illegal gangbanger fellow Marylander at the prison in El Salvador on Thursday. They sat down for a nice cup of coffee, and he looked at him with love and concern in his eyes. Van Hollen wouldn't even talk to an actual Maryland citizen whose daughter was raped and murdered by an MS-13 gangbanger from El Salvador, here illegally, but he has the time for this thug in his own country. Here's Tom Homan.
2 different federal judges said he's an MS-13 member. A police department said he's an MS-13 member. ICE data shows he's an MS-13 member. El Salvador says he's an MS-13 member. As you know, MS-13 has been designated terrorist. The facts of the case have changed since that first decision. So again, I'll leave it up to the DOJ to argue that case in court, but that is where I stand, and that's my belief.
President Bukele says that, hey, he likes playing chess, so I think he knows what's going on here. The picture tells 1,000 words, with the left especially. A federal judge says Google illegally dominated 2 different markets for online advertising technology. A U.S. district judge in Virginia made the ruling on Thursday that could allow prosecutors to push towards a breakup of the company's advertising products. 27 in North Glen, 28 in Centennial, 29 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Good Friday. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The spring weather we've been enjoying is going to come to a crashing end with a strong cold front. Temperatures today will reach the upper 60s and lower 70s, but it will get a lot colder by late this afternoon and evening. And later today, there will be scattered rain showers and thunderstorms developing. Rain and snow turning to wet snow tonight. Could see an inch or 2 on the grassy areas by morning. Lows upper 20s. Much colder Friday. Highs only 30s. Lingering snow Friday night. Lows 20s. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. It's the 30th anniversary. Tomorrow's the 30th anniversary of what at the time was the largest terrorist attack period, but it was domestic. The Oklahoma City bombing. You just heard from Steffan Tubbs. Spent an hour with him live in studio. He was on the ground within 6 hours of the attack that took place, what he saw, what he experienced, the tragedy that it was. And I think it's important to remember this. I was 13 years old at the time, and you're just kind of coming into the world, and you're trying to make sense of everything. And to hear from Steffan what he experienced was a real honor and privilege. Now, she was in the courtroom throughout the duration of this trial, and Steffan said, you got to connect with Lynne Bartels. She's got a great reputation in this town as a reporter, a storied career. And she's taken time to join us now. Good morning, Lynn. Thanks for being on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, good morning.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you.
So I don't know the full breadth of your experience with Oklahoma City. I don't know if you traveled to cover it with the Rocky Mountain News or it was just a trial. But Steffan had said to me, you got to connect with her because we sat next to each other throughout the trial. Let's start with the trial. And you're working for the Rocky Mountain News at the time. Give folks like me, who were only 13 at the time, a sense of what that was like here, the whole trial in Denver, Colorado.
You know, it's interesting. Before the trial even started, I went to Oklahoma City on the anniversary. I guess I was going to see the Murrah building. You know, it looked like a dollhouse on one side ripped open, but everything had been torn down. But talking to Oklahomans who were so upset that the trial was moved to Denver because they thought they could reach a fair verdict, which I think Judge Mage was brilliant and determined it should be moved to Denver. The security was enormous, just the procedures to get in and out of that building. You know, it was it was, you didn't realize it at the time, but you're like, wow, I have a front row seat to history. And it truly was the most amazing thing. Karen Abbott was the morning court reporter, and Karen Abbott had been the Texas high school shorthand champion. So everybody hovered around her during the breaks. Did you get this quote? Did you get this quote? I was the afternoon reporter, and it just, the testimony, the everything was, it's hard to comprehend just you always hear all of those lazy government employees, and you'd have these people testify that maybe they, especially Secret Service, they hadn't had a day off in ages, and all this was happening. It was just so intense, and such good people, and I remember when the bombing happened. I remember they arrested McVeigh driving away from it because his license plate was dangling or something, and he ended up in jail because he had a weapon on the seat of his car. And then when they realized they had the guy, and he came out, and do you remember using that orange jumpsuit? And he looked like a football player, a Tennessee football player, that orange and all that. Then when you see him in the courtroom, he was kind of this skinny little guy. It was just so shocking to sit and look at him every day, and just you look at him and say, "What got into you?"
That's Lynne Bartels. Lynn was representing the Rocky Mountain News during the trial of Timothy McVeigh that took place here in Denver, Colorado, and the bombing actually 30 years ago tomorrow. Now, Lynn, how long did the trial last? And help me remind me kind of what Timothy McVeigh was arguing, that he didn't have anything to do with it, or that they got the wrong guy, or yes, but I was motivated in his mind in a righteous way, or what was the point of the trial?
Oh, they really, his attorney, I don't know. There was so much evidence against him.
Yeah.
There was somebody said, there was so much evidence, and you have to remember there were two trials, because first Timothy McVeigh went, and then Ceri Nichols went. And it was, when the jury deliberations happened, I remember all these, talking heads nationally saying, look how they've humanized these people, because it was, they called them Terry and Tim. It wasn't Tim, McVeigh, and it wasn't Ceri Nichols. Well, if you talk to the jury, it's because, the jury were Coloradans, and they kept mixing up the Mick. So it was McNichols. We had Mayor McNichols, McNichols this, McNichols that. And to clear it up, they called them Tim and Terry. It was two vastly different trials. They weren't even the same animal, though you did have the same parade of victims come in and testify, and some of the same witnesses. The McVeigh trial was first, and I always say there's something. I'm not a fall and winter person, but that trial started in I think it was a spring snowstorm on opening day, and these jurors had to drive from all over the metro area to a central point to be picked up. But every day you got out of the courthouse, and it was lighter and warmer, and whereas then when you followed it with the Ceri Nichols trial, it was going into winter, so it was colder and darker. And in a way, for me, that's how the two trials felt, a little differently. I mean, McVeigh was just, the evidence was so there that it was really interesting. And when you're sitting in the courtroom, that first day, I thought it was going to have to be carried out there, because you have to keep your emotions in check. And I'll always remember Helena Garrett was at the federal building looking for her son, her infant, her toddler, who she had dropped off that day. And she saw him carrying out these other babies, because there was a daycare center in the building. And she said that one little baby that the fireman was holding, the little alphabet blocks in his hand, and he had a brick lodged in his forehead. And the stories were just so, you could hear gasps in the courtroom. And you always see, if you watch Courtroom on TV, no outbursts from the courtroom and all that, but it was so hard not to cry. And the testimony was, it was riveting, and in a way, it made it so dramatic, because there was a lot of boring testimony, like people, testifying to these money orders that were purchased, that sort of thing. And then to have somebody come in and say, yeah, I was in the Murrah building, I was injured. The worst part is, I can't even open my mouth to eat a hamburger. I have to eat everything cut up small. And the worst part, and this guy kind of starts crying, he goes, my grandson thinks I look like a monster. And it's just the impact of what was done to these people. It was, so, Timothy McVeigh said, he wanted to send a message to the federal government. And I think in the long run, what happened was Oklahoma sent a message to Timothy McVeigh. This was stupid, and it was horrible, and it was immoral, and it didn't make us hate the federal government.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's Lynne Bartels. Lynn, a storied career as a journalist in Colorado, was covering the trial of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols for the Rocky Mountain News. I want to ask you about, you were in the room with the judge, with the jury. You got to see this whole process play out. Do you think they got a fair trial? Do you think the judge did a good job when you got to see and look at the jury? Tell us about them. Were they involved in the case, taking notes? Were they? Did they get to the right verdict? All that stuff from your perspective.
Well, first of all, I was in the courtroom with some really seasoned national reporters who followed big national stories. Some of them had done the OJ trial, so they kept saying, comparing Judge Maitch to Judge Ito, which is comparing Pee Wee quarterback to, John Elway or something. They would just say over and over again, I love this judge. I love this judge. And the jury, like I said, it was two different trials, two different things that I think it was so easy in some ways for the first jury because the evidence was so overwhelming and the attorney hasn't presented it as well. The jurors were Coloradans, and, they were tasked with this, this thing. Remember, they couldn't watch TV, they couldn't do any of that. They weren't sequestered, but they were warned to do that. And the Terry Nichols was a little different. Michael Tiger was a bit of a tiger, the defense attorney for Terry Nichols, trying to cast doubt, that sort of thing. I mean, I don't think it was ever doubtful. I remember the shock in the courtroom because, McVeigh guilty on all counts. And that Rocky Mountain News had that great picture of the woman running from the courthouse, with her hands in the air, the jubilant. And there was that mixed verdict with Terry Nichols, right, where they not guilty on some of those first charges. And so I remember the sentencing hearing because Terry Nichols had been found guilty, not guilty on some of the charges. Michael Tiger was acting like, he just kept going on, and Judge Maitch stopped him and said, Terry Nichols is a traitor. He's a traitor. I mean, he may not have been convicted on all these charges. And the flush across Terry Nichols' face, the jurors, that was interesting when you looked at the descendants. McVeigh, when they were having neighbors come in and testify about what a good kid he was, and I remember they said, well, Timothy McVeigh had sent him this anti-government material, and they go, what is this kid got wrapped up in? And McVeigh flushed. I mean, he was kind of, he was embarrassed. I think he thought at that time, too, what did I get wrapped up in? He went to Waco and watched that burn and was just like, oh, the federal government's so terrible. And the federal government does do things that are wrong. Terry's was, he wasn't arrested right afterward. They got him later. I thought there was plenty of evidence to convict Terry Nichols. And I loved it when Judge Maitch said he was a traitor, because he was a traitor. He was a total traitor.
Wow, That's Lynne Bartels you're hearing from. Lynn's storied career here in Colorado as a journalist was with the Rocky Mountain News covering the trials of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols as we are coming up on the 30th anniversary of the bombing tomorrow that took place in Oklahoma City. Lynn, I want to ask you, you're reflecting on this 30 years from now. You had a front row seat to those trials. What do you think what's your message to the American people reflecting on this 30 years later?
You always say try not to forget, but we do forget. And that's what's sad. I wish everybody had the chance to go through the Oklahoma City memorial that they have up there. The 168 chairs for the people who died. They have a lot of the newspaper clippings. They have the tape recording. They actually had a hearing going on across the street, and then at 9:02 you hear this big boom, the explosion of it. I think we thought after then, there really was that anti-government rhetoric. I think it died down after that because people saw how crazy this was. And then we went through, the period where it was the attacks on us were from foreign countries. And we focus more on that. But definitely the homegrown things, you really have to watch about it. It's so, and you have to look at social media. It's so much different than it was then. But, people get on and they say these things and they incite people. And look, you look at what happens in even government and people getting death threats all the time, anonymous, and then they track them down because they're real. People seem to think that violence is the answer to everything.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We've kind of gone that way, that we've decided that, Jeff and I have talked about it a lot on the show, and you're listening to Lynne Bartels, former Rocky Mountain News reporter that was in the courtroom during the Oklahoma City trial of both Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh. We've talked about it on the air a lot, that many people believe that their free speech also includes the freedom to commit violence, that somehow that is part of their exercise of free speech, and how we've decided that right now. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Lynn, is what was something during the trial that you didn't know or surprised you? Something that was presented, something that happened. I like the idea of when you talked about Judge Maitz referring to Terry as a traitor, but the idea of what else inside of that trial that still sticks with you, that's something you didn't know?
There's so many things that stuck with me. Remember I talked about Helena Garrett, the woman who saw the little toddler being carried out with the alphabet block in his hand and a brick lodged in his forehead. And she talked about they were trying to get DNA from everybody to identify him. And her little son, who would wobble up to the stereo, that one of those clear stereo covers that was glass, but he could see his reflection.
Yeah, they have the doors you'd push on them and they would come out and they'd swing out. Yeah.
It was clear, and he would kiss on it because he could see his reflection, and that's what they used to identify him, the DNA, and those sort of things were just so horrible. Like I said, I think the biggest thing to me is the prosecutors, the sacrifices they made. They spent all that time, and it was, the other thing is the bond. Like, Colorado was such an amazing host to Oklahoma. The Catholic church that was nearby, they had volunteers make lunch. Every week, a different number, the space was limited. So every week, a different number of Oklahomans got to come and be in the trial for that week. And they would meet at the church in the morning and have coffee, and they would go and have their lunch there, and there were people to comfort them and fortify them. And there was such a bond from it. And they were, beautiful. I remember that, do you guys remember Wayne Wicks? He ran, he was the head of the press room, right? Well, his daughter Jen worked for him, and they handled all of his press, but she started talking to a young federal security worker outside the courthouse. They ended up getting married, and I remember I went to their, and her mom always talks about when she sees Jen and her husband and their 3 kids, by the way, the youngest son is named for Colton, one of the victims in the Oklahoma City bombing trial. But she always thinks of the daisy that pushes itself up through like the cement and the sidewalk to reach the sun, that there were good things that came out of that. And I think that's what I try to remember, that there were good things, there were good people, that they met each other in this horrible, horrible thing that happened to our country.
That's Lynne Bartels, former reporter of the Rocky Mountain News. She was in the courtroom during the trials of Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh. We talked to Steffan Tubbs last hour. Steffan sat right next to her during the trial every day, day in, day out. Now, we've done a good job of examining the trial and everything else. I want to turn a little more internally, Lynn. I want to talk to you about the emotions that were involved of covering this, what you went through. We've heard a story from Steffan that sometimes there are tears that fall down into the notebook as we're reporting, as we're writing down and you're taking notes. What internally, what were those emotions like? Because as a reporter, you have to try to be antiseptic, but there's no way as a human you can be. What was that like covering this story?
Well, there was no way I could not. I'm a crier. And there's no way I could stop. In the Oklahoma City Bombing Museum, there are notebooks from reporters that look like you covered an assignment out in the rain, but it was just the tears falling down. For me, it was kind of the living victims that you almost, I don't know how to describe it. You know, like I said, you'd have this string of witnesses that were dry about phone records or parts about ammonium nitrate or fertilizer and all that. And then you'd have somebody come in and you could tell by just the way the questioning was going that they were one of the victims, you know, in one way. And you would tense up because you knew what you were going to hear was so painful. And it was, and we would just look at each other, and sometimes a reporter next to you, you'd hold hands, and you would just try not to cry. You had, I didn't realize it was going to be like being thrown into a blender emotionally and just having it turned on. I had covered trials before as a reporter, but nothing like this. And they carefully selected the people who were going to testify about the emotional impact of it. I don't know how the judge was able to really, well, I mean, he's a judge and he heard things and braced himself, but you could see sometimes jurors, you couldn't see all the jurors, they had a screen up, but you could see some of the jurors and you could see noses being wiped and that sort of thing. I mean, I thought to myself, oh, if I had been a juror, I would have been removed because I would have been crying so hard. And you're trying not to do that ugly, loud cry, but the testimony was, it was just so painful what people went through, the, you know, what their kids went through, what their families went through. I remember the woman in the credit union, she had her staffers around her for their Monday, for their meeting, you know, and a semicircle. She thought there was a strange smell in there, so she went to get air freshener and sprayed it, and when she sprayed it, the bomb went off. She thought she did something. Well, then when she came to, her entire staff was gone. I mean, and she was in the hospital with she needed every sort of surgery, but she testified about losing her family because, yeah, I will say this, you know, when the Rocky Mountain News closed, you know, that was a huge family that you lost. And then we had, you know, COVID and we had to work from home. I mean, the office, working in an office is one of the joys of life. You're getting to see people and talk to people, how you doing and all that. And these people, their working relationships was another family to them, and they lost them. And just the people who had just found out they were pregnant, or she was 8 months pregnant at the time, and they still have, you know, have Sunday night dinners, but they sent the empty plate for the person who's missing. It had just been Easter in Oklahoma City, and so there was all these Easter photos. It reminds me of Columbine. They had just had the prom, so everybody had prom photos. in Oklahoma City, everybody had the Easter photos. It was just such an inhumane. It was just, you start thinking about all these, I don't know, wackadoodles, actually. And you're like, okay, get upset, but run for election, do this, do that. Don't fill a truck with fertilizer and blow it out in front of a federal building. And they saw people dropping their kids off, McVeigh did. It was, I don't know, it was evil. It was evil incarnate, what you heard in that courtroom.
Wow. You have us riveted, Lynn. Thank you so much. That's Lynne Bartels, Rocky Mountain News, detailing her experience, front row seat to history, covering the trials of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols upon the 30th anniversary tomorrow of the Oklahoma City bombings. Like you said, Lynn, we are going to be forever linked as a city, the city of Denver to the city of Oklahoma City because of that trial. And you've brought out a lot, and I sure appreciate your time.
Yes,
this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for having me on.
That's Lynne Bartels. And we'll continue with your phone calls and texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Bill, that discussion with Lynn on the boy. They had to get the DNA from him kissing the glass.
Yeah, and I know exactly the kind. I'm certain there's so many people in our audience that know exactly the stereo setup they're talking about. In fact, in your mind, you can hear the click as you push on that piece of glass and the magnetic latch releases. You know what that sounds like. You know what the pressure feels like. You know how big those things are. And, that's, and that's the way I had to get the DNA. Oh, that's hard. It's really difficult.
I'm grateful for friends like Steffan and Lynn who were ahead, they're 20, 30 years ahead of me. And when you get to witness something as a journalist, you have that front row seat, right? Like I spent 4 days with Palestinian protesters, and I was going back through my videos the other day, and you're just like, wow, like you kind of feel like Forrest Gump. You're just kind of like, I can't believe I'm in these places. And then for them to be able to recount it, take time with us.
Oh,
I want to say a special thank you to both Steffan and Lynn for going into a very deep emotional place for them.
Yeah, you could tell that it really impacted and affected both of them.
For both of them.
Very deeply. And it's 30 years, and you'd think that after so much time, they say that time heals all wounds. But today, with both of them, we revisited those wounds, and it seems at times just as fresh as when they were there. That was tough. But we appreciate both of them so much.
Thank you to both. If you missed any of the conversation, we're reflecting on the 30th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, which is tomorrow. You go to 710knus.com, download the last 2 hours of our show, and then fortunately for you, Pete Boyles is going to cover this again tomorrow.
Yeah, and he's got some other
different
guests
aspects.
And, different aspects of it and stuff like that. So you get another dose tomorrow, and he's going to bring in some other reporters. I think Steffan's going to make an appearance on his show as well, but that'll be a different conversation. And he's going to talk to Kevin Flynn. He's got a couple other people involved. It'll be neat. But again, it's going to be a rough one, and he'll do it the only way that Pete can. Which,
and I want to close with this. This is, I think, the one. Remember. We have a Christmas ornament. It's in the shape of an angel made from the glass of the church near the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh, wow.
And I was visiting the city and decided to go by and saw that. And so remember the innocence that was lost on that day. And then what Steffan said is really important. If anybody had just said anything in the run-up to that around Timothy McVeigh or Terry Nichols, it would have resulted in the saving of 168 lives.
Yeah, that people are like, oh, I didn't realize what they were talking about. Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, I didn't say anything to anybody. I let it go. Yeah.
You got to speak up.
Yeah, you do.
All right, I want to talk to you about our friends with Dan Caplis and Dan Caplis Law. I've known Dan for well over a decade. Pro-life, pro-faith, pro-family, pro-America. This guy has it when it comes to principles and values and a career dedicated to getting justice for people that have been injured in any form of injury case, okay? But more than just being a great guy, Dan's a real winner. Listen to this. Dan is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Dan is also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Caplis Law is so trusted that he's the official law firm partner in the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Caplis Law is a serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases on a percentage fee basis so that he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. So if you need Dan's help, give him a call. Here's the phone number, 303-770-5551. That's 303-770-5551, or hit dancaplisLaw.com. That's Dan, C-A-P-L-I-S Law.com. Breadman texting in, you guys are crushing it today. My little Grinch heart feels sorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you, Breadman. It's hard for us,
it
too.
Is. Oh, it's hard.
So, we've got some
Adam
good
took
news.
The Kleenex and he put it in the other studio. It's been hard on me on this side.
We've got the good news coming up in the next segment. We're going to get into the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's Easter weekend. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
We are Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Boy, we got to take a deep breath, pivot a little bit. Big conversations around the anniversary of Oklahoma City bombing. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk with Mike Wright, pastor at Littleton Christian Church, and our Cowboy poet laureate. He's going to help us ride into the sunset on a Friday. Jeff Hildebrandt's going to be live in studio.
Yeah, I was talking to Jeff Hildebrandt off air and said this has been kind of a real big, deep, emotional, difficult morning today. And so it's his job to send us home with a smile. So, no pressure.
That's right.
No pressure at all on Jeff Hildebrandt today.
I want to talk to you about our friends over at the Art of Granite. Are you ready to transform your kitchen or bathroom into a stunning masterpiece? Well, look no further than the Art of Granite for your premier destination. For exquisite granite, marble, and quartz countertops for over 15 years, Mitch Floria, owner of the Art of Granite, has been crafting and installing custom countertops, fireplaces, showers, and more. Their team of experts will guide you through the selection process, ensuring you find the perfect stone to match your style and budget. Visit the showroom in Golden or browse their online inventory at theartofgranite.com. Discover the endless possibilities for your home renovation project. All you got to do, listen to this, is mention KNUS and you get a free bathroom countertop with new kitchen countertops. Or choose a free kitchen or bathroom sink with any countertop package. They'll help you come up with a whole new look for your house. And with these golden handcuffs we all have with these high interest mortgage rates, well, you got to redo your own home, and the Art of Granite is there to help. So don't wait. Transform your home into the oasis you deserve. Schedule your free consultation with Mitch today. Go to theartofgranite.com. That's theartofgranite.com. Mention KNUS for those exclusive savings. Transform your kitchen or bathroom dreams into reality with theartofgranite.com. Coming up in the next hour, Pastor Mike Wright is going to join us to give us a little inspiration this holy holiday weekend.
Yeah, and this is always,
I guess holy holiday is kind of redundant.
It is kind of weird, yeah. But it's a holiday weekend, but Good Friday is a difficult one because this is the one in which, we have the crucifixion versus Easter coming up Sunday. And this is that one that can't necessarily be celebratory, but the joy and the redemption that is coming
on Sunday.
And so, so this is a tragedy that leads to something amazing, but it's hard and you have to give the weight of the day as well. So when we're having this conversation about Oklahoma City, this deals with it as well, because you have to know that our Lord and Savior, is killed today and then rises, on Sunday. So that's kind of nice to know that there is some light on the other end.
All the priests and nuns, I want you to take note that Bill was listening.
Yes,
during all those theology classes.
Yes, I was. Even though I was talking smack and I wasn't behaving, and I sometimes spent time in the hall, I even listened then, so I could hear. So yes, I was paying attention, even though, sometimes we're screwing around in the pews in church too. Yes, I was.
It does work.
It does.
There's that scripture, train up a child in the way she could go, and they won't depart from it as they get older. So it actually worked. It took hold.
It did.
I was joking, though, that... Bill, I was joking with all the people yesterday at the rally that Bill might be the only person in history that was argued into the kingdom of God.
Yeah, exactly. That could be it. That's probably good. I like that.
It doesn't normally work for most people, but it works for you.
Exactly.
All right, you're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
It is 9 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, April 18th. Good Friday! Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. We're going to have a great conversation this hour. It's been just a powerful show, diving into the 30th anniversary of Oklahoma City, which is tomorrow. But we're going to pivot here because it's Holy Week for us Christians, and we're going to get into what Good Friday means, Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and then Resurrection Sunday. And if you don't go to church, what you could do this weekend to maybe check it out for the first time. So be joining us live in studio is Mike Wright. He's the pastor of Littleton Christian. Not going to want to miss this conversation, but now it's time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
31 with spring snow in Denver. Good Friday. Expecting a high of 35 today, and then expecting beautiful green grass in a couple of days in Colorado. That'll help the grass. The snow will. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, this morning on Fox a few minutes ago.
And what we have just released here today is 10,000 pages that have been sitting in boxes within the National Archives that had never been digitized or viewed publicly before. These are documents related to the government's investigation into the assassination, documents related to discussions that were going on in other countries, State Department cables around the assassination
of RFK. So we've seen JFK, and you have weekend reading now with the assassination of RFK. They are releasing them today. The suspect in the Florida State University shooting is being accused of having white supremacist views. The one-time president of a political club at Tallahassee State College says the suspect was asked to leave the club because of his white supremacist rhetoric. Reed Siebold tells NBC News they finally found somebody. They went after. They had to find this. This is their narrative. Told the club's only rule was no Nazis, and the suspect used so much rhetoric, white supremacist rhetoric, that they asked him not to return. So that's their push, and that's what they wanted right after this happened. So he has some history of white supremacy, but I will say this, he obviously is mentally deranged to even do this. He's a lunatic, crazy. And if race was huge for him, he would have gone across the street to Florida A&M University and HBCU. His mom is a sheriff's deputy, and he will get what he deserves in Florida. I'm certain they will do the right thing. The Secretary of State says the U.S. will abandon Ukraine peace talks if no progress is made with Russia. Marco Rubio made the comment in Paris today after a meeting with Ukrainian and European leaders. Rubio said President Trump has dedicated a lot of time and energy to this, but there are a lot of other really important things going on that deserve more attention. Big Tish, Letitia James, the lefty globalist George Soros attorney general from New York, facing fraud charges after fraudulently trying to ruin 47 last summer. Here she is.
I will not be silenced. I will not be bullied. I will not bend. I will not break. And I will not bow to anyone. No one is above the law, including the President of these United States.
Okay.
And the Office of the Attorney General will continue to stand up.
They're saying that your house in Brooklyn is a legal 5-family and the mortgage on it is for a 4-family house. Is that true?
So let me just say that, Errol, you know it.
Is that true, Letitia?
As any good attorney, I will not litigate this case in a camera. It's important that we will respond to these allegations at the appropriate time and in an appropriate way. But I will not go back and forth with respect to these baseless allegations. I am more focused again on standing up for the freedoms, the liberties, and for the rule of law in the state of New York.
Easily one of the most annoying political creatures walking the earth right now. Frightening. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen is another. He says he met with gangbanger Kilmar Abrego Garcia Thursday night at the prison in El Salvador. Got to have a cup of coffee with him. Garcia has been there since he was deported from Maryland last month. Van Hollen said he was initially turned away from the prison, but then hours later he was allowed to visit with Garcia. On Truth Social this morning, DJT said that Van Hollen looked like a fool. I agree with that Thursday, and added he was begging for attention in El Salvador. Amazingly, Van Hollen never even called a Maryland mother whose daughter was raped and murdered by an illegal gangbanger from El Salvador. But Van Halen goes down there and he rocks it and has his little cup of coffee with the gangbanger. 30 years ago tomorrow, the great Steffan Tubbs hustled to Oklahoma City to cover the OKC bombing. He was working as a young reporter over at KOA, and he will never forget that day.
I mean, Oklahoma will always be a part of me.
Yeah.
Because I know it's so... I don't think I've cried about this in 30 years, man. I apologize. You know, the kids, those people that just went to work. I went through a lot of therapy after this. You know, I was 25, 26, and none of us had ever seen anything like that.
Unbelievable morning, unbelievable show. He was on with Jeff and Billy, of course, this morning. He's doing great work at the DEA. And thanks for coming on, Steffan. And Lynne Bartels, who covered it also for the Rocky Mountain News, was on last hour. She sat next to Steffan during the trial here in Denver.
That first day, I mean, I thought it was going to have to be carried out there because you have to keep your emotions in check. And I'll always remember Helena Garrett was at the federal building looking for her son, her infant, her toddler, who she had dropped off that day. And she saw him carrying out these other babies because there was a daycare center in the building.
All right, amazing show, guys. 29 in Westminster, 30 in Lone Tree, 31 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on this Good Friday. Have a great Easter. Blake Olson, News Talk, 710 KNUS.
The spring weather we've been enjoying is going to come to a crashing end with a strong cold front. Temperatures today will reach the upper 60s and lower 70s, but it will get a lot colder by late this afternoon and evening. And later today, there will be scattered rain showers and thunderstorms developing. Rain and snow turning to wet snow tonight. Could see an inch or two on the grassy areas by morning. Lows upper 20s. Much colder Friday. Highs only 30s. Lingering snow Friday night. Lows 20s. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. It is a very important week for Christians. It is Holy Week. You had Monday, Thursday, which I went through a seminary, and I still don't quite understand what Monday, Thursday is. But we have Monday, Thursday. You have Good Friday, which, how is it good when there's a guy that dies on the day? We'll talk about that. And then you have Resurrection Sunday. So there's a lot happening, and I always love to talk with the real pros, pastors, about how we should reflect on this week, how we should prepare, what God's doing through with this week, and how it affects and changes our lives personally. And joining us live in studio is the pastor of Littleton Christian Church, Mike Wright. Mike, thanks for being here.
Well, hey, Jeff, it is a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just start with let's start with Monday, Thursday. What happened last night?
I love it. Man, Monday, Thursday is a great day. A lot of people get confused about the title, but that comes from the Latin, mandatum, which is the word for commandment. And in John 13, Jesus gathers his disciples and says, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you." And so we named the holiday after that. On Monday, Thursday, you celebrate the Last Supper. Last night, I had a group of people in my house, and we ate sort of a Christian Seder meal. We kind of pulled the two traditions together.
And that's because Passover.
Yes,
is
Passover.
Close by, right?
Yes. So Jesus is the true Passover lamb. And then we did the weird thing that Jesus did in the Gospel of John. We washed each other's feet. I will tell you, it was so uncomfortable and beautiful to do together. But that was us trying to practice that new commandment, mandatum.
Okay, so that's yesterday, and then today is Good Friday.
Today is Good Friday.
A lot of people are hosting services. I think you are as well.
That's right.
So
tonight
at 6 p.m. This is kind of a somber day for
That's right.
Christians, but it's called Good Friday. So help us with that.
Yeah, that's right. Today is the day that we recall the death of Jesus, that we remember the cross. And of course, Jesus left the supper. He went out and prayed all night in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was then betrayed by his friend Judas and put on trial, a trial in the night. And this is because Jesus' whole life was a challenge to so many people. He had presented a way to reach God that challenged the religious elite of the day. They had a whole system in place, and Jesus came along saying, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the weak, blessed are those who mourn." In other words, I'm giving access to God to those people who think they don't deserve it at all. And the way he spoke, the way he acted, he was claiming to be God left and right. And so, of course, this is blasphemy. This is heresy. And so the leaders put him on trial and executed him.
And that is Good Friday. Now, I've and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You went to seminary. I went to seminary.
Yes, we can have a challenge between Denver and Fuller.
Yeah,
How about
there you
that?
go. And you and I actually used to do this when we were roommates a long time ago, is to debate theology after class. You have the way of the flesh, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then to deal with the way of the flesh, you had the way of the law.
Yes.
So way of the flesh is you just kind of give into whatever your desires are, right? I just feel like doing this today. I'm going to go do that. And the Bible teaches there's a lot of consequences to that. And I think most people, as you get older, you realize you just give into gluttony or drunkenness, and you end up in a pretty bad place. So you have the way of the flesh, and you have the way of the law. And I don't want to say that Christianity is the third way, but because it's a fulfillment of the law. But the law created some problems, and Jesus was dealing with this, right? That the people that were really serious about the law, the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees at that time, had created such a barrier to God with the law that we weren't loving one another. They're jumping on Jesus for healing somebody on the Sabbath, all this stuff. And Jesus is trying to get through that in almost a third way, and I hesitate that because it's not a rejection of the law. It's the fulfillment of the law.
Right.
But Jesus is clearly trying to deal with a reality that they had created all these rules around God that people weren't connecting with God. They weren't loving one another. And so his ministry is trying to deal with that. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to put it, that there's the way of the flesh and the way of the law. You could also think of it like this, that the law is another way of the flesh, that what the law becomes is a way for us to earn something, a way for me to work my way to salvation, a way for me to be good enough. And what happens when I'm following a way that says there's a way for me to be good, a way for me to be saved, is I'm going to therefore know who's on top and who's underneath them and who's underneath them. I will have a whole way of ranking myself over and against other people. It's just another way to sort of appease myself, justify myself, show that I'm good. And so in a sense, both things are about self-justification, whether we're talking about the law as the New Testament kind of refers to it, or about the flesh. They're both about doing something for myself.
Now, there's a lot of people out there that will look at Christianity and go, that's a bunch of rules I don't want anything to deal with, right? Like, you seem nerdy, you seem like Ned Flanders, and you feel guilty all the time, and so why would I want to deal with all these rules and laws? Now, I continue to be hesitant about this because the law plays an important role, especially in the Old Testament, of trying to guide a bunch of people that are just experiencing God for the first time, and they're like, okay, so what do we do?
Yes.
You don't dismiss the rules and the laws and stuff like that. But a lot of people look at Christianity and go, I don't want anything to do with it because it seems so oppressive. Tell me about that mischaracterization.
Sure. Yeah. You made a really good point about the law giving identity to a people that didn't have identity. That's a whole other conversation. But what Jesus does when he comes along, he announces his kingdom with what I said, that blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are persecuted. We hear those things and it sounds upside down. But what Jesus is doing when he's saying those things is he is saying, in me, God is coming all the way to those people who are on the very bottom. This is why Jesus says things like, the last shall be first. And if you want to receive the kingdom, you need to make yourself like a little child to receive it. So what Jesus is doing is he's flipping the whole system on its head. He's saying he's going to come all the way across to us. And so what he does is he fulfills the law perfectly in and of himself, that he's without sin, but he comes all the way across to those who are realizing that they're full of sin. And this is where it gets really remarkable to me, because there's either a way of trying to show God that we're good enough by obeying the law. And that's where Christianity can feel kind of rule laden and burdensome and deadly. And frankly, that's false religion when you start looking at it like that. If you look at it first as, I recognize that I can't do anything to obey the law myself, and I surrender, then I recognize what Jesus has done for me.
Well, tell me, what did Jesus do on Friday?
Yes.
Okay, what actually happens in world history, in the universe, on that cross?
Right. I mean, the cross, of course, is you talked about the fulfillment of the law, the fulfillment of, so the law, when we say the law, we're talking about, for Christians, the Old Testament,
Ten Commandments,
the Hebrew Bible, all the rest of that. And so you have in this, in the Old Testament, you have this presentation of really a sacrificial system. So God had previewed grace. So the people couldn't obey all of the commandments. And so you have the Day of Atonement, you have daily sacrifices at the temple. All of these things are God's way of saying something is going to die in your place. So they have this in their heads, they have this in their hearts. And then comes along Jesus, and he steps in not only as the high priest who would have performed the sacrifice, but as the sacrifice himself. And he offers himself as the thing that dies in our place. The book of Hebrews calls him the once and for all sacrifice. You know, it's done. The system doesn't need to continue because of his death. That's what happened when he was crucified on Good Friday.
Okay. So that did what to us before God? Okay, there's complicated theological words, justification, those types of things, but there's clearly a brokenness between us and God, right? We used to walk in the garden with him.
That's right.
It used to be perfect. Now that gets broken because of sin. Now what I struggled with younger was thinking, well, I'm generally not a bad guy, right? The 10 Commandments, I haven't murdered anybody, I haven't raped anybody, I'm generally okay. But there's a barrier there between us and God called sin that is more foundational to us. It's a heart issue. It's not just little deeds that you have to follow, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you're asking what did that do for us? What did
Right.
Jesus' death?
Friday's death does something to fix that barrier. Right.
Right. Yeah. So I love the way Jesus talks about it in the Gospel of John. He talks about if anyone is in me, he has, it's a really weird way of talking, but what he's saying is his death will be our justification. So think of it like there is Jesus at God the Father's right hand. And when Jeff comes along, Jeff could either say, look at all that I've done, or Jesus could say to the Father, look at what I've done, Father, and he's with me. That's what his death earns him the right to do.
And that brokenness has now been repaired, and you have direct access to God via the power of the Holy Spirit. And the Bible talks about this kind of new priesthood, right? We don't need to go through priests. It is a direct access because of what God does.
That's right. He's our great
Christ.
He's our great high priest, and we have access to him.
Right. Wow. We're talking with Mike Wright, pastor at Littleton Christian Church on this Holy Week. All right, so Jesus dies. Why then do you need the resurrection 3 days later? I mean, we just talked about what he did. Okay, so that's done.
That's right.
Shouldn't that be enough? Why don't we go visit Jesus' tomb?
Well, gosh, if Jesus is still dead, he's like all of the other founders of all the other religions, right? So he gave us some interesting ideas, but an interesting way to live, and then we can line that up next to all of the others and say, oh, which one do we think is the best way? But if he's alive, then that vindicates all of the things that he said about himself. You have a guy claiming to be God in a whole bunch of different ways, and then he dies. Well, he's not God. Right. But if his tomb is empty, if he is living now, then better pay attention to what he said about who he is and what that means for right now. That means Christianity is not a philosophy that's full of a guideline for life, but rather it's an opportunity to be in relationship with a God who is alive right now.
So how should we approach this weekend? You mentioned you did some stuff yesterday. You got an evening tonight. Someone's local church may do a Good Friday service. What is that going to be like? And then what is Sunday going to look like? How do we reflect all that this weekend as Christians?
Sure. Yeah. You guys have been covering the Oklahoma City remembrance, and look, the world is a hard place. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of you out there are going through really difficult things in your lives. And tonight, if you can find a service that is engaging with the death of Jesus, because that gives meaning to the pain that you are going through. This year, you lost somebody you love. You are dealing with a chronic illness or something that's hurting you in your life. Right now, you are looking at your own death in the face, so to speak. There is a story of a God who understands that, who is there with you in that. That tonight tells us that this isn't a God who's far removed from our pain. This is a God who goes all the way into it with us. So I would just plead with you to find a service near your house, find a community that's near where you live, where you can engage with people, and remember the story and thank God that he joined us in our death.
Made that sacrifice.
That's right.
We'll often watch The Passion of the Christ, right? And it always makes you a little uneasy and queasy to watch the suffering that Christ went through, the beatings, the crucifixion. Why can not just jump to Sunday, man? That's little bunnies and pastel eggs and stuff like that. Why do I gotta spend? Why is it important to spend Friday putting myself in an uncomfortable position watching a dude be executed?
That's right. Well, we've been talking about sin and the cost of sin, and we need to know that sin got paid for. We need to know. We need to recognize that there really was a price paid for that sin. If we don't have tonight, if we just jump straight to the resurrection, then we're getting an empty form of the story, and we're rejecting, we're turning a blind eye to the hard stuff in this life. And we need to be able to acknowledge that our own pain, that's real sadness. That's real stuff going on. And the people going through hard things, we don't avoid it, we press in with them because we have a God who pressed in with us. So we don't skip straight to Sunday. We have to look at the cross first.
That voice you're hearing is Mike Wright. He's the pastor of Littleton Christian Church here in Littleton, Colorado. All right, so then what's Sunday all about?
Oh, man. Sunday is what makes the whole story make sense. That's what makes this whole thing, the crucifixion, something to celebrate. Today can't be called Good Friday unless you have Sunday. So today becomes good because on the third day, that tomb was empty. Jesus walked out. And when he walked out, it vindicated everything that he said about himself.
And how does that give us a sense of what we're going to experience too?
Oh, death is dead. Death is dead. That's what happens. I was thinking about it like this. I have 4 kids. I love my kids. And I hope I'm not the only parent out there who sometimes you have terrible dreams.
Yeah, right.
Where, you have an awful dream. It's like a horror movie. You see something terrible happen to one of your kids. And when you have a dream like that, the sun comes up the next day. You walk out and you see your kid, and the dream fades. You start to, by the grace of God, you forget it. And so Paul writes about how death is swallowed up in victory through the resurrection of Jesus. I think it will make this whole deathly world feel like that, like a dream that got swallowed up into life. That's the story we tell on Easter.
All right, so somebody maybe goes to church twice a year, Christmas, Easter. Maybe he's never been to a church, okay? They're going to walk into something. Are they going to be asked to publicly proclaim everything they've ever done that's wrong? Look, they don't know, and they might feel uncomfortable. So what's going to happen to somebody that walks into a church for the first time this Sunday?
Yes. Well, I would hope, and I can't speak for every church. I can certainly speak for my church and for your church. I would hope that they will be welcomed with joy, no matter how many times they've been to church or what they've done this year or who they voted for or whatever. I would hope that they would walk in and be welcomed with absolute celebration. Why? Because Jesus paid the price for them too. I mean, he says salvation is to know the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. That doesn't just mean know about him, but it means to know him, to have a relationship with him. So no matter who you are, when you walk in, that relationship is being offered to you. There is the Son, the crucified and risen Jesus, standing at the Father's right hand saying, I want her. I want him. Let them be with me.
That's Mike Wright, pastor of Littleton Christian Church. And I'll just finish with this. Mike and I go all the way back to high school. We're college roommates. Mike and I were not friends at the beginning of my high school career because I was quite the party animal, and
I was scared of party animals.
Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with church. My wife jokes all the time she would have dated me before my conversion. But I wanted nothing really to do with church. Wasn't that interested in it, and I was out there pursuing all the things that the world tells you you should be: ladies, success, partying, popularity, all that stuff. And I found it wildly empty and unfulfilling, and I was broken. And I was invited to a church camp, and they said I have a personal relationship with Jesus. I didn't understand what that meant. And they're like, well, just go talk to God and ask him to be a part of your life. And so I'm like, well, okay. So I go out there, and I'm sitting on a rock somewhere in Minnesota, and I just go, this was literally my salvation prayer. Lord, I've tried partying without you, and it just doesn't seem to be working. I think I want to try partying with you. I wanted to party with God, and I just said that. And the Holy Spirit came to my life, and it's hard to describe other than you feel a presence join you, and that guides you. And I often tell people I didn't just decide one day to follow a bunch of rules that were written 2,000 years ago. I actually met a God. I met the God, not a God, but the God. Mm-hmm. It changed my life. I have a helper that lives with me now. I feel saved as a result of the work that Christ does. I feel like I have a personal relationship with God. And it all started because I just decided to ask God to come into my life. So, look, this week is Holy Week. Tonight, there are Good Friday services happening at Littleton Christian Church, 6 p.m. That's in Littleton, Colorado. Sunday morning service at 9. Go to littletonchristian.com if you want to learn more about the work that they're doing. But lots of good churches out there. There's certain ones you should probably that's another conversation we'll get into another day. But littletonchristian.com, great church. Go check them out. Good Friday services tonight, and then 9 a.m. on Sunday. Mike, thanks so much for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show.
Such a joy to be here.
Thank you.
All right,
you,
we'll
guys.
continue with some cowboy poetry. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. As we like to do on a Friday, we saunter into the weekend like the cowboy studs we are. But
speak for yourself. I've never been accused of being a cowboy stud. Neither cowboy nor stud. Neither
Cowboy
of those have ever come up.
dud.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
Joining us now is Cowboy poet laureate Jeff Hildebrandt. He's performed at Carnegie Hall. And I apologize for how your career has tanked to the point where you are now Jeff and Bill Show
this
in
is
Denver.
Like, this is like those big music stars. You're like performing at this week's county fair, playing his hit. Yes.
Oh, you forget. I also am the only cowboy poet to ever perform in mainland China.
Wow. The Chinese cowboy.
The Chinese cowboy poet.
And you did so well, they said, yes, please, you can leave now.
We always like to cover a little cowboy poetry. Puts us into the mood. And then, Bill, true to form, I actually become a cowboy for the next 2 days.
I know
It's
you
why
do.
Monday is so hard for me to get back into this, because I just disappear onto a ranch and fix fences and pull weeds, and I'm very quite happy hanging out with my animals. So
And
you
then
help
on Monday,
me
he
with
has to
that
talk to
transition.
You are a cowboy all week long.
Yeah.
I'm. For those of us in Radio Land, we know how much stuff you shovel all week long, and so
I love Jeff Hildebrandt.
So good.
All right, Jeffrey. Okay, Boomer.
Okay, Boomer, listen, this is somebody challenged me to write a poem using modern-day slang that your son will understand. It's not hip to just be drip on a sinking ship. Okay, Boomers, listen up. I've got some tea to spill about the goat from way back when and his call to do God's will. I know some souls are super sus about his claim to fame, and they throw shade on everything, especially why he came. They've canceled all his promises with shouts that it's a lie. Don't fall for all their claptrap cap. Here's the reason why. The real lies come from Satan, who is jelly of God's power, and his FOMO has no equal as we near the judgment hour. It's fina, we all know it, so speak now, don't be shy. Proclaim this truth with kindness. Jesus is your ride or die.
My son over there is loving it, because you're totally. Now, did you have?
He actually stopped looking at his phone.
Yeah, he did. That was amazing.
Did you have to get a translator for that? Because I understood some of it, but those phrases are clearly in the kids' vocabulary.
We got from our younger family a something called a slang flashcard box. Oh, yeah. And so I went through this slang flashcard box, and it explains everything, and there may be more poems coming as I read more, but this is, I wrote out some explanations for some of these things.
Let's help our listeners here. Drip means fancy, expensive clothes.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're wearing the right stuff, you got the
Tea means juicy gossip. Spill the tea.
Spill the tea, right.
Goat, greatest of all time. How about sus?
Yeah, suspect. That's because,
All right.
Steven called it out.
He's answering.
And you get that from Among Us, the game. That's
Yeah,
where that started from.
sus.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you play Among Us, Bill?
Don't anymore, but
I haven't either, but I did at one point. Maybe we should invite listeners to play.
That'd be fun.
Then they could take out their frustration.
Exactly, on me, mostly me.
Okay, you understand what jelly is?
Yeah, jealous.
Jealous.
Yep.
And fina, F-I-N-N-A, it's on the verge of or fixing to. It's about to happen.
Oh.
Okay.
Huh.
So we know the end is fina.
I'm fina the fence.
Yeah, like finally kind of a thing. Yep.
Fina.
Wow.
And ride or die is close and loyal friend.
Yep.
There you go.
According to that. So,
now, do we have one or two more?
Well, let's see. I'll do one, and then you tell me if you want another.
All right. Or is this the crescendo?
This is the The Last Ride.
The Last Ride.
The Last
Let's
Ride.
save
Okay.
that one.
Okay.
I want to go out on that one because
Okay.
that's an important one.
All right. Well, weeks ago, I introduced haiku poetry.
Yes.
Okay. And my version of haiku poetry, which I refer to as Yippee-I-O haiku. Nobody else
I thought you were going to
does.
say something else.
No.
I love Die Hard movies.
Yeah. Well, this is called haikudo.
Yeah.
Okay. And this came to me because of experiences that I had with my bosses at work. You did a great job. All of us are proud of you. That should be enough. No raise. Just, we're going to pat you on the back. Okay. Limp hat, rumpled coat, unshaven, aromatic, talks of good old days. I call that haikut.
Stephen liked that one.
That's good.
That is good. All right, I want to get to the last one here when we come back, because this is a good one, especially considering the holy holiday. I do want to talk to you real quick about our friends at Alarm Detection Systems. Look, reliability isn't optional. When business security is on the line, it's essential. Businesses trust alarm detection systems for the highest level of service and expertise. Think about the time you could be saving using one source for cameras, keycard access, fire and intrusion systems. ADS offers expert alarm installations and testing by highly trained technicians, 24/7 professional monitoring, same day or next day service upon request, because downtime isn't an option. Dedicated teams for cameras, access control, and fire alarms, and over 300 security professionals working for you. Choosing ADS means your businesses stay protected and be ready to open tomorrow. They combine human monitoring with the latest AI camera technology to prevent crime in real time. Trusted by small and large businesses, including many Colorado schools, their security experts will review your system for free. Go to adsalarm.com and schedule your appointment today. That's adsalarm.com. Alarm Detection Systems, the first choice of Front Range and Colorado businesses. adsalarm.com. We'll continue with Cowboy poet Jeff Hildebrandt. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
All right, Mr. Jeff Hildebrandt, take us into the weekend. It's a very special weekend.
Very.
With a little special cowboy poetry.
This is called The Last Ride. As he rode up to the dusty town past the graveyard on the hill, he could sense a showdown coming, though it all seemed very still. Then the word of his arrival spread. Folks knew his reputation, and crowds began to gather with great anticipation. When he rode across the valley, townsfolk spread out on the road to see the man they'd heard about. Their excitement overflowed. They smiled and waved with gratitude as he rode up to the gate. Most didn't know there was a plot that soon would change their fate. It was just a few days later he was ambushed in the night. He was beaten, tried, and crucified without much of a fight. But today, we all can celebrate his last ride into town because we know what happened next. They could not keep him down. And Jesus Christ is coming back on a horse as white as snow to round up all believers. We just pray you're set to go.
Wow. I love that. Thank you, Jeff Hildebrandt.
Yeah,
Get us ready for
it.
Good Friday and Easter. And
Man.
Think about the real battles taking place there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
You betcha.
That's really good. Jeez.
You going to be at church Sunday?
I'm going to be at church tonight.
Great.
There's a Tenebrae service at the church we're going to.
Cherry Hills?
No.
Different church?
No, it's a different church.
Yeah.
And I would give you the name of it, but I can't remember.
Your wife will take it.
In other words, I have no idea where I'm supposed to be tonight.
It's an in-law church
Uh-huh.
as opposed to an outlaw church. No. Yeah, and then Sunday I'm working Sunday in the at Cherry Hills.
As an usher?
As a guest server. I'm the Kirby.
Oh, are you?
I am the Kirby. Yeah, I stand out at the curb. They do not want me mixing with people, so they put me out
with the
in the snow. With
Oh, that's great.
Bill, you got any special plans?
I've got services tonight, and then I'm probably going to go services with my mom, doing the anticipatory one tomorrow because I got a full day Sunday. So I'm not certain I'll make it in there because the Saturday, thanks to the Catholics, will count. So I can get credit. So I know how this works on the scoreboard. So I understand that after a certain time I can do the
Bill and I are going to talk about indulgences and scoreboards and original sin and all that another day.
Oh,
but
yeah, not today.
I encourage all of you, if you don't go to church regularly, check it out. Take a chance and just poke your head in. They're not going to embarrass you. You're not going to be asked to sign up for anything long term.
And you go this weekend, there's so many people that don't normally attend anyway. They'll have no idea you don't belong there. So it's a great way to just blend in with the crowd.
Enjoy it. Jesus Christ saved my life, saved my soul. Give him a check out this weekend. You'll never regret it. Jeff Hildebrandt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bill, very blessed Easter to you, brother.
Same to you, sir. Blessed Easter.
Go to 710knus.com to download the podcast if you missed the show. Till then, God bless you all. Yeehaw! You've been listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
We are Denver's talk leader. This is 710 KNUS.